The rain in the courtyard stopped, the moon was late and the room was dim. The rain in the courtyard stopped, the moon was late and the room was dim. Shen Zichuan's drooping eyes were hidden in the dimness, like a mooring tired bark, through a long night tide. When he looked at Ji Gang again, he used the eyes he had never seen before, as if he had taken off the skin of a man named Fu Jun, leaving a place of moonlight. If there were no master and Su-en, I would still be me, but it would no longer be that I was afraid of everyone in the world, but everyone in the world would be afraid of me. I bleed Shen Wei's blood, and did not need sons-in-law. Ji Gang was in great pain and almost burst into tears. He said, "You are my son. I'm master's son, but my name is Shen Zichuan. Sir gave me a poem, but I'm not an emperor. Emperor. The supreme overlooker in this world is either wearing a crown or an emperor. The emperor must not only check the balance of powers, but also have the mind to accommodate the common people. The emperor supported by the heyday is an invincible benevolent. There is a storm in Shen Zichuan's eyes. He is the shower that swept the rivers and mountains, the blade that tears up the world, but not the emperor who created the prosperity. There is an iron ride of 120,000 from the north, and Ma Tezongbo is okay, but Suen gave me the lifeblood. I have his horse and his brother's food. He is willing to leave the grassy field from the north, in my Duanzhou horse race, master. He is not afraid of my garrison, nor am I afraid of his iron ride. One day I will ban the deer that Li lost, and Suen will ban me. Sun and moon were born in the world, tens of thousands. There is no disability for years. This is the stability that the world is looking forward to, and we are balanced. Scorching sun and glowing moon. The suspension of war is the beginning of another battle, and no king can tolerate their coexistence in the east. Only when Shao Qie and Shen Zichuan are together can Li Bei and Zhongbua get the chance to rest and recuperate. Shao Jiming built a horse farm in Luoshan, and Shen Zichuan acquiesced. This was his concession to leave the north, and it was also an opportunity for him to leave the north. The horse road built by Zhongbua will break the border between the two places, and they merge to form a behemoth that entangles the northeast. Ji Gang sat silently and said, he punched Ji Jia well, and came and went freely, for what he feared. Even so, you have no sons and daughters with him. The matter is unresolved, and North and Zhongbua will not last long. Shao Qie put on his armor and waited in the room for Shen Zichuan to return. The sound of a cheer came from under the eaves, and Fei Xing raised the curtain for Yao Wenyu and said, "The prince has not yet returned." The blanket on Yao Wenyu's lap was a little damp. He propped up the four-wheeler and said, "I'm looking for the second grandfather." "Fei Xing is a bit difficult," Shao Qie said. "I'm here." Yao Wenyu declined Fei Xing and turned in. Shao Qie folded his legs, sat upright at the table, put the soldier's book to his hand and said, "What's wrong with Yuan Zhuo looking for me? It's rare to see Yi. Some things are inconvenient to write a letter, so I can only discuss it in person." Yao Wenyu took out the pad and wiped the sweat from his hand. "Is Yi empty?" Shao Qie leaned back and said, "What's the matter? You have to bypass lands how to talk to me?" Yao Wenyu wiped his hands clean, folded the parcels, and retracted them in his sleeves. He was not in a hurry, saying in the endless rain, "It is naturally more appropriate to talk to the second grandfather about leaving the north. Now that the Queen Mother is defeated in Jiu, Shui Yanqing will take Han Ji's military power next. At that time, Chu Jun ascended the throne. In order to stabilize the commander-in-chief, Qidong will certainly be rewarded. Will the second grandfather go to Bian County for an appointment? Of course Shao Qie has to go. The visit to Bian County determines whether Hassan's raid on Duanzhou can be successful or not, besides Thaxan Qi Juin. Yao Wenyu got the answer from Shao Qie's default. He turned around and said, "Sure son." Shao Jieming inherited the title of Shao Fengshu. Shao Yi should be called Shizi, and he changed his name and continued, "Shizi treats, is there an enlightened sir in the realm?" Xiao Qia's forefinger pinched on the table lightly. He said, "You want to teach me." Xiao Qia was quite keen, and he found meaning in the topic of Yao Wenyu's change. Shuexiujua's Chu Jun is about to ascend the throne, and Qi Juin is to be sealed. When the battle with Bian Sha is finished, they may part ways with Qidong. Yao Wenyu was already thinking about the son-in-law if Shun Zichuan was going to capture the capital. "We are the wolf from the north." Xiao Qia looked up slightly. Shun said, "Not to be emperor." Xiao Qia and Shun Zichuan had no children. If Xiao Yi went to Zhongbua to be instructed by Mr. Yao Wenyu, then Xiao Qia would understand what they meant. Xiao Yan was the successor of Shun Zichuan. This was a good deal for Li Taibei. It was so costly that Xiao Qia didn't want to agree. The second man is thinking of the monarch, and refuses to let Xiao replace the monarch, but even if there is no son, he will not be surnamed Shun, Yao Wenyu told Xiao Qia. Temple. It is impossible for Shun Zichuan to let Shun Wei continue to be a lonely ghost in the desert countryside of Dunzhou and enter the temple to enjoy fireworks. What he wants to judge is the blood of the Shun family. Xiao Qia said, "Yi heir is a son from the north. My brother will never agree to this." Yao Wenyu was silent. He changed his tone and talked with his friends instead, saying, "Do you have any other method? Yi Yulili, the house is not cold, but Yao Wenyu's face is not good. There are countless heroes in the world. Do you know why I went to Zhongbua to come to Lanzhou?" Xiao Qia's eyes were deep painted. Yao Wenyu is not afraid of Xiao Qia, as long as he can finish the game. He is not afraid of anyone. He said, "I watched him flee northward with you, but stopped at Zhongbua. I thought he was going to wash the charges for Shinwei, but he didn't care about it. He doesn't take Zhongbua as his homeland, nor think of the puppet as a home, and advance and retreat from his thoughts. I know he is not an emperor, but I still need to help him, because he is a born puppet master. Your father knows that Zhongbua is rising rapidly. He allowed Lanzhou to enter north, because Xiao Yuan was Lanzhou's only choice. Xiao Fangxiu was the Wolf King who opened up the northern border. He stood in Luoxiaguan and could smell Emperor Guangqing's emperor, and at the most appropriate time became the surnamed King of Dezhou heavy soldiers. He was far more than his sons saw. Far. Shun Zichuan has only one future. Without Xiao Qia and Xiao Yan, he would never allow Shun Zichuan to return to Zhongbua alive. Lan Zhou dared to get there, Xiao Qia said. That's his. That's his, Yao Wenyu said. If there is Xiao Yan. The rain was chaotic, and Xiao Qia didn't respond. Chu Jun feels cool at night. She can't sleep well after being ill, and often wakes up. Opening my eyes to see the sky at this moment, when the time was up, I didn't need the maid to call, so I turned up. The court ladies are new, kneeling and arranging Li Jianting's robes. When she sits in front of the mirror, she carries a box to take care of her hair. Li Jianting was much thinner this time, looking more and more stern. There was no woman's tenderness. Li Jianting didn't sleep well and was recovering from a serious illness. He was inevitably tired, and his ears felt cold. The Gongyi who leaned over to wear earrings for Chu Jun hadn't responded yet, and saw Chu Jun stood up in a dang manner, looking pale and whispering impatience. "Get away!" Gongyi in the temple knelt in a panic, not knowing where the mold of Chu Jun was touched. Li Jianting clenched his lip line and saw himself blurred in the mirror in a dead silence. She stared at this herself, and said after a long time, "I was taught in the gentleman's hall, without earrings." Gongyi nodded a few heads, and responded timidly. Li Jianting didn't want them to go hand in hand, and put on her own jacket. The expensive material was covered outside, like her armor. She felt better, but still didn't speak. When she went out, she saw a familiar figure under the eave. Fu Man ushered in, opened an umbrella for Li Jianting, and charmingly said, "Today the rain is heavy, and the slave has prepared a sedan chair. His Royal Highness can take a nap, and the slave will call you in front of the church to ensure that there is no delay." Li Jianting didn't leave, smiled, and said, My father-in-law, are you busy investigating the case? Fu Man didn't dare to urge, saying, where slaves will investigate the case, it is Yuan Fu's point of mention, and they have sent several adults from the Ministry of Criminal Affairs to supervise it. This means that he did not decide the case arbitrarily, but passed the hand of Kong Yen and had little to do with him. Li Jianting didn't blink her eyes, she said. Isn't it possible for Feng Quan to come out? Fu Man's heart turned and he was worried and said, he is Mu Mu's brother, and he has some relationship with Siyuan Bureau, and the punishment department is not good enough to let him go. He ran several times before and after to run the courtyard, and Yuan Fu also as mentioned, he is a good man. Fu Man is thinking that Feng Quan can return to the palace to do business. He must have been serving Chu Jun for a long time, and there is a friendship between master and servant. Therefore, he is not in front of Li Jianting to vilify Feng Quan, knowing that Li Jianting is still partial. Coming to Japan, as long as he keeps this position, Li Jianting will be tired of Feng Quan sooner or later. Li Jianting said, I've been sick and I haven't believed. What's going on? Fu Man held an umbrella for Li Jianting and drew himself in the rain, saying, it's investigation, oh, your highness, watch out for your feet. The steps are slippery and your slavery. This case is bad for food. The slavery checked with the Ministry of Justice. On the day of His Highness's diet, the Siyuan Bureau had the biggest problem. It was too mixed up and the minded people were broken. He pushed his role in this case clean and let the penal department supervise it, so that Feng Quan died, which was also Kong Yan's business. Yuan Fu is her teacher, who decides whether she can get to the throne or not. Li Jianting is unhappy and can't breathe with Kong Yan. Li Jianting did not intend to go to the sedan, but she temporarily changed her mind and bent in. Blessed with joy, he called His Royal Highness to slow down, and he closed the car curtain for Li Jianting, and urged the to go to Mingletang. By the time Li Jianting arrived at Mingletang, Sun Yu had been waiting. He stood under the eaves and frowned as Li Jianting got out of the sedan chair. In the past, Chu Jun did not pay attention to these things. That is how he got the courtier's blue eyes. Why did the Queen Mother lose power, and couldn't even take a few steps? Sun Yu saluted Li Jianting standing under the eaves in return. Sun Yu didn't enter immediately, but said calmly, spring rain is as expensive as oil, and the 8 cities and Liangtian have been affected by this rain. His Highness has not yet ascended the throne and has no title. How can he ride in the palace? Li Jianting seemed to be epiphany, admitting mistakes and saying, students know something wrong. Hearing this, Fu Man followed. How could Chu Jun be burdened? But he arranged the sedan chair and said quickly, His Royal Highness is recovering from his illness, the jade body is expensive, and the rain is heavy. Sun Yu's face changed suddenly, and he yelled, I talk to His Highness as teachers and students. How dare I intervene? Fu Man's heart was terrible, and he immediately knelt down and scratched his head. Slave, slave. In a hurry, he even committed the taboo of cabinet ministers. Sun Yu and Kong Zheng are both people who have experienced pan-s chaos in the government. They hate the internal affairs to intervene in government affairs. Fu Manping usually runs in the courtyard of the office. Sun Yu saw that as soon as he arrived at Chu Jun today, he dared to arrange a sedan chair to intervene. If he stayed for a few more days, it would be a mess. You dare to break Chu Jun's habits today, and you dare to mess with the monarch's administration in the future. Sun Yu smirked, the thief is bold. Fu Manzhang got bluish forehead, new injuries covered old injuries. Li Jianting said, I'm not good, teacher. Sun Yu immediately said, His Royal Highness is Chu Jun, who is a divorcer. Come, grab his mask and drag him down. Fu Man is the of Si Lijian. According to the rules of Yongyi, Sun Yu must not drink him like this. He listened to the footsteps of the guard. His hands were shaking, and he walked towards Li Jianting's knees and said, slavery should be dead. Slave. The guard couldn't help but pick off Fu Man's mask, dragged him to the open space in front of Mingli Hall, and the rain poured. Fu Man knelt in the center, his lips became blue. Sun Yu said, "Slap." The guard rolled up his robe and slap in front of Fu Man. Fu Man was beaten so loudly in his left ear that he did not dare to hide or shout. Sun Yu didn't stop, turned around and opened the curtain, motioned to Li Jianting to enter, and hung Fu Man in the open space. The applause didn't stop. The author has something to say. Packed luggage an hour late ors thank you for reading 2K Novel Reading Network. Mingletang didn't call for service at the moment. Sun Yu lowered the curtain, led Li Jianting to sit, and returned to his usual look, saying, "You shouldn't let your highness come sick with a serious illness, but you have to urge his highness to come." Mingletang didn't call for service at the moment. Sun Yu lowered the curtain, led Li Jianting to sit, and returned to his usual look, saying, "You shouldn't let your highness come sick with a serious illness, but you have to urge his highness to come." Li Jianting took a seat and said, "Teacher, but it doesn't matter." Sun Yu was heartbroken, listening to the intermittent applause from outside, and carefully lifted the bamboo curtain by the window. After confirming that there was no one before and after, he told Li Jianting, "The Danqing field tax is about to be closed, and the officials involved are very wide. Liang Yishan has begun the inspection of the taxation of Tanjota, was followed by the Tanaka flower house. His Royal Highness stayed in the palace alone, and the officials were anxious. The harem is forbidden and foreign ministers are not allowed inside. Li Jianting had been poisoned some time ago. The cabinet was worried that the Queen Mother jumped off the wall and took Chu Jun's life as a threat. Li Jianting's white cheek was still covered with a velvet collar. She frowned slightly, and the frown on her brows moved lightly, saying, "Danqing Tian's tax case is over, and the field has been measured. It's a critical time, so don't delay. Teacher, we don't have to slow down for me, just follow the law." Sun Yu was quite prejudiced against Li Jianting before, but Chu Jun behaved dignifiedly and was very easy to learn. They respected them and respected him as a teacher. Now he is willing to put his life aside for Mintian. Sun Yu's mood was ups and downs, and he lifted his robe down to Li Jianting and knelt down, sulking and nodding. "His Royal Highness." "What a grievance, Your Highness!" Li Jianting stood up to help Sun Yu, saying, "Teacher, please get up quickly." Sun Yu wiped tears with his sleeve and said, "His Royal Highness is careful in the palace. If the Queen dares to threaten Her Highness, the officials will definitely fight with each other." Li Jianting sighed, "I'm a deity, but a teacher. Huqing Ho of Wuqing and Han from Wuqing are the world's best friends. This is a dangerous job." Sun Yu saw that Li Jianting was so frank with himself, thinking of Han Yen, not only was greatly sentimental. Those who were courtiers, professing loyal ministers, let Chu Jun be trapped in the palace. They lived in tears for a while and said, Han Yu held the army in his hands. Chan and others did not dare to act rashly and suffered. "Your Royal Highness." Han Hanmi Fei Gongye knows all about Chao Yeo, and he is too narrow-minded to tolerate people. The difficult part is the teacher. The 8th Battalion is a capital. In recent years, due to the old traditions, Guan has done nothing since the Xiande years. Li Jianting said here, slowing down his voice, Du Jun and the Queen had a close relationship. It was really difficult for the teachers to punish Han Yen. Sun Yu couldn't bear to want Chu Jun to see so clearly and said, "Now the commander is still in the capital, Qidong's garrison is just outside the city gate. The situation is urgent, and the officials must remove Han Yen as soon as possible." Li Jianting said. The commander accompanied the elder lady to Guining, but the accompanying troops did not have thousands of people. He really started to work, for fear that Qidong was too late to rescue, and it was dangerous. There are 20,000 sergeants in the 8th Battalion. They are not only familiar with the streets of Lidu, but also the opening and closing of the city gate. Han Yun also has Genie Wei as an eyeliner, which can stare at Qi Juin's movements at any time. In prison that day, Qi Juin confused and deceived Han Yen, and half a month later, Han Yen had responded long ago. Li Jianting stood up and saw through the gap of the bamboo curtain that Fu Man was still being beaten. Her expression remained unchanged, but her eyes were rather indifferent, and she still had a gentle tone to Xin Yu. I have a plan, and I can remove Han Yu. Xin Yu immediately said, His Royal Highness, please. Since the Xian dynasty, the Nei dynasty has been shaped like a decoration. The East Factory has no vacancies, so Han Yen is so proud of it, said Li Jianting. If you want to remove Han Yen, you must have an internal helper. Xin Yu changed his color and said in a horror, Pan Dang was in chaos for 10 years. He destroyed the Chao gang to this point, and the old man bowed his head to make the inner court return to power. His Royal Highness, these puppets are useless. Wrong, teacher. Li Jianting turned back and said to Xin Yu, It is the Emperor's fault to puppet the party. The inner concubine is the Emperor's slave. They can use it, but they cannot reuse it. Li Jianting was taught by Shuexiuzhua and was very familiar with Pandang from Yongyi to Xiandinian. She, like Kong Yen, Xin Yu, and other cabinet courtiers, was also afraid of internal conflict. However, being a minister and being a monarch are two different things. The power around the authority is like a tide surging, and it cannot be completely eliminated. Only when it is used can it be contained. The Cold Food Festival is approaching, and the palace will set up 100 official banquets as usual. At that time, Han Kuan unloads his sword and enters. Li Jianting raised his hand and pulled out the Jin in the hair. It is the right time. As the commander of Jiniwei, and the governor of the 8th Battalion, Han Yi had the right to bring a knife. However, Li Jianheng was assassinated in the front of the Tianqian dynasty. The guards were ordered by the emperor. Now that there is no emperor in Dezhou, Han Yen must unload his knife for a banquet. Xin Yu looked at the Jin Yuan, holding Jin Yuan's slender fingers, which was especially pale because he lived in the deep courtyard for a long time. Chu Jun's disease was so thin that she could see the bones, and her wrists were covered between the fairs, exposing her hard bones. Xin Yu lifted her robe and knelt down, sobbing down on the ground. Han Yun is carrying martial arts. If it is in danger, what should you do to hurt your highness? The marshal won the battle in Bian County in the spring. Yuan Fu can give a special seat to the table. Han Han is the governor of the army, allowing him to sit side by side with the marshal. Li Jianting thought deeply about the matter. Quan led, as long as Han Yu stepped into the door of the temple, he would never come back. When Xin Yu heard this, he really learned the power of Chu Jun. The rivalry between Fuman and Fengquan began as early as the Emperor Tianqian. This investigation of Fuman put Fengquan in the first place, which is precisely to exclude dissidents. He wanted to ascend to the inner dynasty, and became the official seal of Li Jianting after he ascended the throne. This man is adept at flattery, and he has gone back and forth several times. If he is left alone, as long as the situation changes and Han Yi takes advantage, he may be bad. Li Jianting put Fengquan back to him because Fengquan will never be a traitor to Fu Man after this prison sentence. The two of them are afraid of each other, they will urge each other, and even continue to compete with each other in order to win the trust of Chu Jun Han. She is a capital of the military Wuyin and Jinyui. As long as he is dead, the 8th Battalion and Jinyui will fall into chaos, and she will be solved in an emergency. However, when Han Shi unloaded his knife to the banquet, he would definitely leave a confidant Jiniwei outside the palace. The time to kill him was very short. If he missed, he would endanger his courtiers when he raised his arm. The matter must be carefully arranged by the teacher and Yuan Fu, and there must be no leaks, Li Jianting said, leaning halfway down and raising Xin Yu. The success or failure is here. The wind suddenly rolled the bamboo curtain. Xin Yu nodded heavily against Li Jianting's gaze, and Shen Xing said, "The court and others must live up to His Royal Highness." Fu Man in the Rain was beaten with deafness in both ears. His mouth was bleeding, he was crying, and saw Xin Yu stepping out of the door, looking at him with a cold face. he whispered. Slave knows wrong, sir. Sin Yu shrugged and said, If it is not for your highness, I will spare you today. Go on. The guard stepped back and stood under the eaves of Mingli Hall. Blessing forward on his knees, Chao Sin Yu continued to scratch his head and said, What adults have learned is that slaves never dare. Li Jianting came out of the curtain, watching Fu Man's face burst into tears and said in tears, You go, clean up, change into a clean robe and wait in front of the hospital. Fu Man raised his arm and wiped the tears on his face, looked at the shoes exposed by Li Jianting, and scratched a few more heads, saying, Slave obeys. When Fu Man got up, he hurriedly fished his wet robe, and across the heavy rain, he saw that there was no disappointment on Chu Jun's face, but only a touch of pity. Kong Yen did not dare to speak out when he was preparing. They talked in private houses and would not gather, so they visited by name. When the rain stops, the cold food festival is blinking. Feng Quan was imprisoned in prison, and he has been recuperating in recent days. Today, he spent some flowers for the governor, bowed in front of the mirror, and exposed the trace of torture on his wrist when he raised his hand. Li Jianting didn't close her eyes, she looked at Feng Quan as if looking at it. Feng Quan shook his hand slightly in Li Jianting's gaze. To point something wrong, Li Jianting raised his finger, pinching Feng Quan's wrist, and took Huayuan back to his forehead. What do doctors say these days? Feng Quan listened to the wind when Gong Yi moved around, avoiding Li Jianting's gaze, and said, Thanks to His Highness, the doctor said that there was no problem. Li Jianting stood up and the maiden behind her covered her robes. She turned her head to look at herself in the mirror, and she always seemed to stare at herself in the mirror, as if looking for something. Details of the Siyuan Bureau, you will tell me after the banquet. Li Jianting helped Zheng Baijin to stop looking at the ghost image and turned to the door of the palace. Feng Quan understood and stepped forward to support Li Jianting. Li Jianting took a few steps and stepped on the light on the ground. She looked down at the light, the polished floor reflecting the sky outside the door, as if she was standing among the clouds. At this moment she was strangely childish, like nostalgia for this situation, standing for a long time. The blessing outside stood on the steps, waiting softly by the door. His Royal Highness, it's time. Feng Quan felt that his arms were slightly sinking, and the wind after the rain blew the golden pheasant beside Chu Junji, and the butterfly struck a spin and slammed into the cloud. Li Jianting stepped out. Han Yen took a bus to the front of the palace gate and met Helian Ho when he got off. After waiting for a long time, Helian saw Han coming over, rushed to meet him, and entered the palace side by side, saying, How can you not care these days? The imperial court now impeached me and said that I am occupying Mintian. This is not a hypothesis. Provocative. Han Zheng turned walnuts in his hand and said, Do you say this to Tsin Yu? Is he willing to believe it? He has the account given by Pan Yu, who has an estimate of the Bachengtian tax. Then think of a way. Helian Ho followed Han and whispered, They want to ban the Queen Mother. I can't even see the Queen Mother now. The Empress Dowager Han said that the mud bodhisattva crosses the river, and it is difficult for her to protect herself. This account has been traced to Puching. Seeing Kong Pu's endless posture, they will not appease as usual. He couldn't sleep all night for this matter. He felt his beard and said, I'm also anxious. Is it anxious to be useful? He narrowed the who was leading the way and whispered to Helian Ho, Chu Jun is sick, but it's okay, what can I do? What is loyalty to Fu Man? Helian Ho walked fast, sweating slightly. These stubborn people don't recognize the word loyalty. What is the poison of chase? I don't believe his suit. It must be he did something in it and didn't dare to offend the cabinet. Now don't he go to Chu Jun to serve? They are very cheap. Han Yen looked at the place to come. When they stepped down, he took the walnut back to his arms, bowed his head slightly to the guard, and said to Helian Ho, After you sit down, go to the house and say, There are many eyes, this is not a place for discussion. Helian Ho was so anxious that he had no choice but to respond and followed Han Yan's into the temple. The author has something to say. I thank you for reading 2K Novel Reading Network. The Han Shuryan set up a special table, and Han Chi looked at Qi Juin on his left when he was seated. He squinted his sleeves and said, "When will the commander be ready to return to Qidong?" Qingming rained suddenly. The road is not easy to go. The Han Shuryan set up a special table, and Han Chi looked at Qi Juin on his left when he was seated. He squinted his sleeves and said, "When will the commander be ready to return to Qidong?" Qingming rained suddenly. The road is not easy to go. The next to Qi Juin is pouring wine. The glass in the palace is delicate and elegant, and the amber-colored wine is beautiful. Qi Juin turned the wine glass and looked at it carefully. Bian County was in a hurry, and it was time to leave, but the rain in Badu kept on, and I was worried. Isn't it? Han Yen sneered. How could the cabinet let Qi Juin go? The lives of these people were tied to Qidong's garrison, and they hoped that Qi Juin would stay with them during the period when they stayed at the capital. Han Bai said to Qi Juin at a distance, "Go out along the Fengshan campus and go straight south to the Hezhou Road. This is a newly repaired road that runs along the Kaling River." The commander returned to talk with the Ministry of Defense. It's faster to go from here. The battle of the Green Mouse Department is over, and there are other departments. The Qidong 5 County Defense Forces are waiting for the command of the commander, and I am anxious to hear it. Although Han Yen is narrow-minded, he is very knowledgeable. He was able to sit with a couple of Tsin Yu at a dinner table, and there were real things in his stomach. He went to the field more often and was familiar with the road. Qi Juin couldn't hide him from it. Wait for a moment. Qi Juin put the wine glass down. Everything is impossible. Between the two talking, watching Xiao Ho Yifei arrived. Fei Shi and Pan Yen are best friends. These days, he was seriously ill because of Pan Yu's death. He didn't play anymore, and it was not easy to see him once. Qi Juin said, "Little Howie went to the 8 camps?" Pan Qingji's death, he was stimulated, and suddenly he was cheered up to find an errand. Han Yen drank some wine. "Where is there any vacancy in the North Korean Central? As long as the 8 major camps can tolerate it, I will transfer him to Spring Camp when. The Chunkwon camp is equipped with fire salamanders. Qi Juin thinks of the fire salamanders of the king of Fanzhou Wing, and he thinks of the scorpions of the capital." With a long sigh, she finally faced Han Yen squarely and said, "Commander." Han Yen leaned over and made a listen. Qi Juin looked dignified and said, "Hungry?" Han Yen laughed immediately and said, "The commander wasn't in Sudu in the past, and I didn't know I had to slap my stomach before the banquet." He lowered his voice and said, "The cold banquets are all cold foods, or the mid-autumn banquets are more delicious. Good wine and crabs, sitting in the imperial garden to enjoy the moon and spend beautiful flowers." The two talked happily about each other. It wasn't until the outside the temple declared the Empress Yujia clearly that they got up, backed to the younger ones, kneeled down, and greeted them in unison. The Queen Mother wore a crown of 12 dragons and phoenixes with gold-laden orb, and earrings adorned with East beads. She was dressed gracefully and luxuriously, and she did not see any signs of fatigue. After sitting dignifiedly, she only said, "Get up," and stopped speaking. The court officials saluted again. After the ceremony stopped, Chu Jun Li Jianting stepped into the hall. Qi Juin had a moderate amount of alcohol. During the dinner, he chatted with Han Yi a bit, and several toasts were rejected by Han Yi. Han Yun did not bring a knife and was cautious in his heart. He kept an eye on the entrance of the hall, where there were guards deployed by him. Kong Yen led the Empress Dowager Chao and Chu Jun toast in order, and the atmosphere was exuberant, and Fumin directed the eunuchs to serve. The officials of the Hall of Lin Institute have ridiculous eloquence. Several jokes made the officials lean back and forth, and even the Queen Mother eased her look. Li Jianting got up in time, respecting the Queen Mother. The Queen Mother looked at her lovingly and said, good boy, like the ancestor Guang Qinggong. After that, Jiangshan will take care of you, and the family will be relieved. Li Jianting is now this age, how can there be after? Li Jianting stood and drank the drink, his cheeks faintly red, and he looked at him. She told her mother-in-law, Su Zixiao, the emperor's granddaughter is stupid, and he knows nothing about politics. Li Jianting has not participated in politics. Prior to the Danchengshan tax case, she heard all the official articles reported by the cabinet in Mingli Hall. Many political affairs were not fully understood, but a few professors from Kong-yi personally gave her an analysis and interpretation during the lecture. It's just a scene. The Queen Mother drank with Li Jianting. Before Chu Jun's ascension, all government affairs should be ruled by the cabinet minister auxiliary minister Kong-ing. The right of emperor's emperor had only symbolic approval of the right to redemption. The word urgent. Li Jianting bowed down and paid homage to Kong Yen after the wine was full. The teacher and student saluted each other. She went back in turn and finally respected Han Yen. At this moment, Shengla was ringing in the hall, and the hanging at the door was put down, covering the hall door in the shadow. Han Sun reciprocated. After he drank, listening to Li Jianting said, "The commander is the emperor's left arm and right arm, and he is also the governor of the capital. He is careful and works hard, which makes me admire him very much." In her words, the blessing behind him filled the wine again, and Han Yen quickly said, "His Highness has broken the old minister." Li Jianting smiled. She was not exhausted between her eyebrows. She smiled unexpectedly and tenderly, jokingly. "The teacher is cabinet assistant Yuan, and the commander is the elder Jin Wei. How can I be good?" When Han Jian heard that Li Jianting put him and Kong Yen together, his words were flattering. He unexpectedly thought that Chu Jun was frightened by the last thing, and he wanted to please both ends and be a peacemaker. Han Sun served the cup with both hands, facing Li Jianting, and said, "I am a martial artist, how dare you compare with Yuan Fu? Your Highness, please." Li Jianting looked at Han Yen, covered his sleeves and drank the wine in his cup, and Fu Man filled it again. The wine bottle she took was different from the wine glass, and the depth of the bucket was large. Han Yu had already sweated a lot during the 2 games, and did not want to drink it again. His Royal Highness, Han Yan's alcohol is okay, but after thinking about it, the people outside of his palace are all his own, and he could not help but relax his vigilance, and said to Li Jianting, "His Royal Highness is still young, and the government affairs obey the decision of the cabinet. Military affairs. This year, the cabinet will reduce the military expenses of the capital. Your Highness, this is not the case. We are both responsible for patrolling. Now we do even have a decent school ground. We still have to reduce military costs. This." When Kong Yen stood behind Li Jianting, he frowned and stopped. "The banquet doesn't talk about government affairs. You and your Highness complain about these things." Han ate the wine, held the bottle in his palm, smiled at Kong Jipi and said, "Permanently, you have drafted the ticket and asked me to submit. I can only state my difficulties if I meet with His Royal Highness." These days the Duquesne pushed Helian Ho tightly. He was an honest man, and he called Senshuani scolded. He stopped, "His Royal Highness, His Royal Highness." Sinyu stood up a few weeks ago and first worshipped the Queen Mother and Li Jianting before saying to Han Yen, "The chief of the Court of Impeachment was impeached, commonly known as the word official, and all the matters presented were harmed by the court. It is close to the northeast grain road and runs through the waterway of Yunqing. If there is a tax problem, we have to say. The court case has not yet been opened for trial, and the cabinet has not been more guilty than Helena. How can I say that I forced him? Tight? I think he is pushing the people of Gaoqing tight." The music in the temple stopped gradually, and the courtiers present were silent. Han Yen felt that he couldn't hang on his face. He just didn't like the courtiers of Hanmen. Before, he just didn't boil his head, but now he was holding his hands in his hands, and Xinyu dared to hit him so openly, making him furious. Han Yanxiang pressed and laughed. In search of benefits, you and I are old acquaintances. I understand you. Since Qiqing has not yet opened a conference review, the ticket has not been read, and what has been played has yet to be verified. You cannot draw such conclusions without authorization. He Lianhou had no soldiers and no power, and the account also let Pan Giotto pass to the household. Now he was anxious like an ant on a hot pot, and he only dared to speak secretly when he had hatred in his heart. At this moment, it seems that they are about to quarrel. They can't eat any food, put their chopsticks on their feet, and stand up to talk. Don't talk about government affairs at the banquet, don't talk about government affairs. Han Zheng handed the empty bottle to the eunuch, saluted Li Jianting again, and said, "Sweeping His Highness." Li Jianting also handed the empty bottle to Fumin and said, "Why do commanders take their minds, but? Han Yen raised his head suspiciously. A gust of wind blew from the door of the palace, and the hangings slowly fluttered. Li Jianting seemed to be in a mess. She raised her hand to support the cricket, and touched her fingertips with the golden cricket. He said clearly to Han Ji, "Jin Zun is the same as Ruin, and the white blade is not forgiving." Hanging to the ground, the door closed suddenly. Han Yan's eyes widened. He immediately backed off, knocked over a few in panic, and the wine bottle utensils shattered in time. He said, "His Royal Highness." Qi Juin didn't get up and hit her with a punch. The porcelain dishes and chopsticks trembled immediately. She picked up the gold chopsticks and slanted them to the side of Han's neck. Han Yen waved his sleeves to block and only heard the bang collision. He even wore soft armor in his official robe and arm restraints between his arms. Han Zheng kicked his younger foot and smashed into Li Jianting with a bang, and made a furious thunder, "Daughter of the door, how dare you kill me?" Fu Man watched Han Yan's power, and he heard the footsteps coming from outside the temple. He felt timid and took a few steps back with the tray. Kong Yen, who was on the side, rushed forward, blocking Li Jianting, and the forehead was smashed by the young couple. He pushed Li Jianting backwards with all his strength, shouting at the bleeding, shouting in the shock, "Don't listen to his nonsense. This thief will not get rid of the country, there will be no peace. Kill him, kill him." The door of the hall was loud, and the guards outside heard the noise and came to hit the door. Fengquan took a few eunuchs and pressed the door latch. The courtiers in the hall were all horrified. Helian Ho was not stable, and he continued to step back, muttering, "What is this?" Li Jianting did not stand firm in the retreat and fell to the ground. Her heart pounded, holding on to Jin Yun, watching Fengquan be shaken by the door, and yelled, "Clog the door!" Han Yi set up soldiers with armor to surround the palace. The wolf's ambition is not hidden, and I will not kill him tonight. Kings are dead. Xinyu didn't pay any attention to his feet in the confusion. He was tripped by a wine vessel. Xue Xiuzhua supported him. He waved in the hall and said eagerly, "As long as Han Yen is dead, the rebels will have no head. Don't be afraid." Yin Luo set an example, and took the lead in front of the door, and stood up against the door with his nephew. Han Zheng and Qi Juin fought several times, winning in kung fu refinement, and wearing armor, forcing Qi Juin to fall to the ground. The 5 beads in his hair suddenly collapsed. She didn't dare to stay, turned over violently, and left the place. She said that from time to time, Han Yen followed her foot and stepped on her proper position. Qi Juin. Han Yen sighed severely. "You can't bear you really don't know how high you are. You want to win me and call you lousy." Qi Juin didn't bring Lujiu, and he usually attacked on the battlefield. When he met Han Ji, a master of martial arts, he would suffer. She led Han Kun to take a few steps back, and she had already reached the side of Hua Xiangyi. Seeing that she was about to approach the Queen Mother, suddenly she held up the wine glass that Hua Xiangyi hadn't drank her head, and drank the porcelain cup. Broken, bent to eat, sandwiched the broken porcelain with 2 middle fingers, wiped his mouth. "Don't you know? Qi Juin told the truth. I have a stroke. Han Sun struck Qi Juin's facade with a punch. Qi Juin sideways dodged, raised his hand without porcelain, and held Han Xian's arm, turning back hard. Han Yan's pattern remained motionless. Qi Juin was discouraged, and instead of letting go, he kicked his side to Han Yan's flank. Han Yun knew that she usually mentioned ghost-headed knives, but didn't expect her to introduce a woman. The force of the capture was so great that she couldn't let go, she just hit her foot. He fiercely paused, screamed, and banged bang bang several times, leaning his elbow to shake Qi Juin's hand away. The two of them fought fiercely, smashing the debris under their feet between advance and retreat. The courtiers who blocked the door were all civil servants, and all the courage to fight with the outside guards was based on courage. The door of the temple door was getting bigger and bigger. Feng Quan could already see the face of the guard who was outside. He suddenly snapped at the guard and screamed, "Bitch hides a hybrid," followed by "Wang Ba eggs also want to be fragrant and spicy, and make you daydream. Then top our house and tear your skin." He looked handsome, followed Chu Jun into the palace as if to change his spleen, did not dare to be mad, usually see everyone with a lower eyebrow and pleasing to the eye, but unexpectedly today, he was shunned out and scolded with sharp words. The courtiers also scolded people, but they all held their pens and thoughtfully scolded the rhythm, cursed the beauty, cursed the demeanor, and immediately heard a string of sounds like Fengquan Lianzhu cannon, and the morale suddenly increased. Han Yan inside did not want to entangle, twisted Qi Juin's fist, and took off Qi Juin's right arm. Qi Juin flipped smoothly, hit her on the cheek when she landed, and this time she bumped against a small table on one side. She licked the blood of her teeth when she supported her arms. This old dog is worthy of being a master under Ji Lei's hands. He keeps hiding, and meets Qi Juin to take advantage. It is so easy to replace Xiao Qie with a strong arm who can also beat Ji Jiachuan. Han Yan bullied himself, trying to take Qi Juin out of the waist. Qi Juin blocked his arms, hugged his feet with his backhand, and lifted him abruptly, toppling him to the ground. Kong Yen rushed out with a jug, thrown aside before smashing, and hugged Han Yan's arm. Han Yan was pressed by Kong Yan's left arm, and he couldn't make it for a while. He had to turn over. Xue Xiuzhua turned over his younger, held his 2 feet, and knelt down to hold Han Yan's right arm. With her arms stretched, Han Yan changed his face and hissed out, "You little people." He shook himself hard, but Qi Juin struck up, kicked on the ground, and shattered the broken porcelain between his fingers to Han's neck. Han Yan desperately lifted his body, hardly connected it by his chest, rubbing the bleeding line between his neck. He was about to open his mouth, and then suddenly a person rushed behind him, holding his half-body. Fu Man gasped and said, "Master is doing it." At first glance, it was Han Han who said in a frightened and furious voice, "The thief is meaningless and should have killed you already." There is a vague tendency to stand up. Who knew he hadn't done it yet? He was thrown back by Qi Juin's punch, and this caused Han Xi's nosebleed to flow out, and he screamed with hate. "You support Li Jianting to the throne, you are the rebels. She is just a cricket." Door. Listening only to the sound of Han Yun's left eye was very painful. He wailed so painfully in his neck, and saw the golden butterfly falling on Jin's trembled on his cheek in the blur of blood. Han Yen shivered with pain and was at the end of his crossbow saying, "You! How dare you!" Li Jianting shook her hand to pull out the golden robe, and the blood robe was dirty with blood. She saw that Han Yun had not died yet, gritted her teeth, closed her eyes and looked at the disorder of Han Yun's neck. Han Yen interrupted, "Well, you." His right eye was severely pecked during heavy rain in Lidu, and his left eye was blinded by Li Jianting. At this moment, there is no person, his face is blurred, and his lips move. "Think of me, for a while, for." Fu Man was also pressed by Han Ing, and he screamed in frightened by the blood. Kong Yen released his hand with a little heart and confirmed that Han Yen was dead. Then he let out his breath and fell to the ground. Han Yen fell to the ground, crooked his neck, and stopped moving. Xue Xiuzhua was also breathing. He stared at Li Jianting, his eyes mixed with incredible. Li Jianting's Jin Yen was covered with blood, and fell to the ground, making a clear sound. Her hands were full of blood, and she was frightened by Han's appearance. She took a half-step back, and her throat was gasping heavily. Livestock. Li Jianting's fingers were shaking so badly that she wiped her face with ridicule in the dead silence, as if wiping away her tears, but leaving only her red fingerprints. I am not a livestock. Facing Xue Xiuzhua's eyes, Li Jianting slowly tightened his fist. She flushed her eyes, showing a complex expression in this sudden change, both like crying and laughing. I'm not. Li Jianting squeezed her voice from her teeth. She turned abruptly and raised her right hand towards the door of the temple, as if holding the authority that was once out of reach, saying, Chu Jun is here, who, be a chaotic thief? The queen held her hand. Although she was still in the high position, she seemed to have returned to the day she entered the palace. That day, she stood in front of the towering temple, looking up at Emperor Guangqing, who was in her prime. Emperor Guangqing once stood at the peak of 9, raised her right hand and said to her, Heaven is here. King Li's. The author has something to say. I moved in the past 2 days and sent my packed luggage yesterday. I didn't come back at around 1730, and I asked for leave before I could catch up. The frequency of this leave is the highest in the book I have written. I feel embarrassed every time, so I will make 2 or 3 changes every other day. The final volume feels bad, and the update is often late. The number of words for the next few days on the next few days is not enough. I don't know how to apologize. It's useless to add more. Chase harder, thanks to 2K Novel Reading Network. The frightening cold food feast came to an end, and Xue Xiuzhua took off Han Yan's waist tag. The guard lost his banner and was afraid of the Orthodox Majesty. He did not dare to rush into it again. He was repelled by the influence of Li Jianting's Chu Jun is here. The frightening cold food feast came to an end, and Xue Xiuzhua took off Han Yan's waist tag. The guard lost his banner and was afraid of the Orthodox Majesty. He did not dare to rush into it again. He was repelled by the influence of Li Jianting's Chu Jun is here. The 8 major camp generals on standby outside the palace all stayed in Hanfu. The governor hasn't returned yet, or don't let that Kongpa Ran leave. Han's son leaned on the couch, slamming his cigarettes hard, and sniffing softly, saying, Although Kong Ji is not good with the governor, but we have soldiers in hand, and the 20,000 army can surround the palace when they hear the movement. Who are they? Dare to act lightly? They are all scholars who have nothing to do with chickens. Can they really pin their hopes on Qi Juin? Qi Juin can't run away. Hua Shi-san listened to the aria on the stage, shook his head and followed the hum, and the folding fan beat the palm rhythmically. He said, The governor is a hero of the world. Which of the flower racks in the palace are his opponents? This flower 13 was the sister-in-law of the Huaqing flower family. In the early years, he intervened in the affairs of the embargo and was ruled by Shao Qi. He was afraid of the overlord Shao Suan and fled home. He spent no time in Fuqing and did not dare to enter the capital until Shao Qia left Fudu. Come on, said Hua Shizhong, raising a folding fan, pointing to the top proudly. My aunt is here, who dares to move the governor? Han's son exhaled smoke and smiled at him. All of them were 250 bales, and no one was too disgusted. Feisher will be here in a few days, Han said to the waitress to stop smoking tobacco. Some of us will give him the whole table, welcome and welcome well. Pan Qingji is dead, he is embarrassed. Hua 13 folded up the folding fan and turned to his side saying, Say me, this Pan Qingji died well. If he didn't die, what would he do if he was exiled to Huaizhou? Sooner or later, it would be dead in our hands, and it would be broken. It's not easy to deal with Feisher. Pan Yen handed in the books of the 8 cities. They did not expect that Han Yen would go back. The 8th Battalion has been a grandfather in Badu from the beginning of Yongyi years. Only the band army led by Xiao Qie during Xiande years threatened the status of their capital. But the band army left, they became the capitals of the capitals and acted wildly. There was no longer a cautious statement. Several people drank and made fun, and it was getting late in the chat. Hua 13 was a little drunk, leaned against the back of his chair, raised his leg, and shouted that the opera actor was to give him a lame leg, and while Jiuxing squeezed his face, he teased. "How old is the young lady? Look at the eyes." Han's son behind him quickly stretched out his neck, showing off. "Do you know who she is? Hung Xian. He is famous, and you can't find it anywhere you go out of this door." They teased the celebrity one by one, and they were stubborn. The outside sister-in-law knocked a few times, and the maid in the house lit the palace lantern under the eaves. Li Du was quiet. Qi Wei led the defender to kill Lieutenant General of the city, sneaking into Li Du. He held his time, and after 3 hours of ugliness, he raised his hand to signal to his subordinates to surround Hanfu. Hua Shi was drowsy and suddenly felt urgency. He got up to go to the toilet, and when he walked through the corridor, he saw that there was a little light in front of him, and he fixed his eyes on the fire. Hua Shi was so frightened that she ran back with her pants on, and chased the maid and asked, "Is it burned? Why is there no one to extinguish the fire? Quickly, let the army who is waiting in the other hospital to pick up water to fight the fire. This house is Han Yan's. If Han Yan returns tomorrow morning and sees the house burned, they will not be able to eat and go." After spending 13 glances, several of Han's sons heard the sound, and stood under the eaves to look at it, but saw the fire grow bigger. "What's the matter?" Han said nervously. "Why isn't it gone?" The nursing home came to the door and replied, "This fire is so strange. Some time ago, someone should have let it go on purpose." Liu Ye came to the door to see. "All the army listened to you." Mr. Han did not dare to be lazy in this matter. He dragged a few people around and greeted him for $13. Everyone went hurriedly towards the door. Before he came to the door, he heard the people in front shouting, "Kill in!" 13 flowers changed color and said, "Kills come in? Who killed them?" The servants around were all messed up. "I don't know who," replied. "You can't see clearly, the black one. When you see the army at the door, you will kill them. Push them in." Han's son stunned his cigarette, dragged his robe for a few steps, and then shrank back, yelling, "Quickly pass the transfer order and bring all the army on campus to rescue." But he does not have Han's waist card. He can't adjust the capital of the school. The killing sound of the front yard came in, and the army who was accompanying at the door couldn't stop it. Seeing that the situation was not good for Hua Shi, how could he care about others and follow the crowded servants running backwards? Han's son couldn't move even the sword, and ran away when he saw it. Qi Wei broke into the door and sought someone by fire. Regardless of the chaos in the courtyard, he hacked when he met the army. Bodying has been in judo for a long time. Except for the knife that was used to encircle Xiao Qie last time, he has never encountered such a stubble. Several generals flinched and retreated, and the soldiers underneath went in circles, letting the garrison be defeated. The garrison did not let the fire burn for too long. The 8 major battalions were scattered all over the place, and there was no channel for transmitting messages to each other. The fire was too strong and it would definitely cause doubt. By the time the fire in Hanfu was put out, the courtyard had fallen. Qi Wei didn't let Hua 13 wait for the group to pay the group together. Only Han's son drilled a dog hole to escape. The next day the sky shimmered. The courtiers defended Li Jianting and moved to Mingli Tang, and then issued a series of edicts. He first dismissed the title of Han and then reprimanded the 8 major counts of Han. He was copied on the grounds of collusion with the party and intent to rebel, full door. Han's hometown, Wuching, is complicated, and heard the wind made birds and beasts scattered, and ran away with softness. In just a few days, the situation in Badu changed drastically. Before the room had time to respond, the ninefold throne took the new master. The Queen Mother was lying sick on the couch. While Li Jianting was busy, she had to serve her Queen Mother as her grandmother and Queen Mother. Sun Yushang wrote that Chu Juanda's filial piety was merged, and the courts immediately praised him. The Queen Mother is physically weak, and Chu Juna's call for ascension is rising. The storm is over. Yao Wenyu sprinkled bait on the koi in the pond. It's time for the marshal to return to the county. Sun returned to the battlefield. When the commander comes back, he should go to Bianjuan. Shen Zichuan faced Nico and looked at the jade in his palm. Han Yu died lightly. The news has just arrived. Yao Wenyu had bait left between his fingers. He said, "The Queen Mother is incapable of returning to the sky and cannot withstand the death of the family. When Chu Jun ascends to the throne, he will be captained as a baron." Shen Zichuan held Yu Pei and laughed. Yao Wenyu said, "The prince wants Gu Qingqing to return to Lidu, but he is not allowed to move, so it must be reserved for great use. Gu Qingqing is not in a hurry. This move will not be effective until Chu Jun ascends the throne." Shen Zichuan looked at Yao Wenyu. "I look forward to her ascending the throne." The tender willow branches by the pond, the tiger slave fluttered and rushed to the side of Yao Wen, covered with dust. Yao Wenyu touched it with his hand and said, "Fu Jun looks far away. Shui Yanqing wanted a monarch, and God really gave it to him." Shen Zichuan smiled. "However, a powerful monarch is at the mercy of others. Dread it," Yao Wenyu said softly. "That's right." Shen Zichuan watched as the crowd of koi carps came together, all floating on the water as if lame. Shui Yanqing is a minister. Shui Xiuzhua has played a major role in supporting Chu Jun and inspecting Tiangong. He is not a greed, robber, or enclosure, but he is a power minister. The wise emperor of this world is not afraid of power ministers, but he must be afraid of powerless ministers. If Shui Yanqing is willing to work hard here, he should give Chu Jun a chance to get his handle," said Shen Zichuan. "Even if nothing happens, let Chu Jun feel at ease. Without a handle, it means that it is difficult to handle, and there is no way to check and balance." Yao Wenyu groaned. "Shui Xiuzhua has such a spleen that he will not leave Chu Jun with his own handle." Shen Zichuan said meaningfully, "Then he will be in danger. Sometimes the line between loyalty and treacherous is not clear. The decision is in the hands of Li Jianting." Shen Zichuan figured out what happened to the cold meal in Gu Qingqing's recount. It turns out that Chu Jun was not the vase that Shui Xiuzhua moved over. She took root like a thorn on the throne, and relied on the perseverance far beyond others. Grows quickly. Since Han Yen is dead, it is useless to keep Han Jin. Shen Zichuan seemed to remember the man, and told Fei Xing behind him, "Open Han Jin's door, let him go, and send him back to Wuqing." Fei Xing thought that Shen Zichuan would keep Han Jin, but he did not expect that Shen Zichuan would throw Han Jin off like this. He felt sorry but did not dare to talk. Dezhou is broken and it's unknown whether Tianzi can command the heroes. Yao Wenyu turned the four-wheeled vehicle. Chu Jun will not fight with Shui Xiuzhua at this moment. What matters right now is Bian County. In May, the handsome commander wants to capture the territory of the Mouse Department. Some bear departments did not dare to watch the fire from the other side, but they were afraid that it would be a fierce battle again. Qidong has enough food, and Qi Juin is not afraid. Shen Zichuan said, however, Zhongbua does not support useless people. Hai Rigu has rested for almost half a year and should let him go out. Yao Wenyu comprehended it and said, "Does the prince want to use Hai Rigu to talk to the bear department? I heard that Amur is only the 6 chiefs, and there is a bear department that has not yet surrendered." Shen Zichuan also looked at the water. The land of the Green Mouse Department belongs to Amur, and their food was given to Hassan on the northern battlefield. Now there is a bear department. Being forced to fight is also for food, and we are not short of food. Amur differentiated de Zhou with scorpions. Now Shen Zichuan also holds a batch of scorpions. It is a waste to stay in his hand. He wants Hai Rigu to play a role. The Green Mouse Department, the Bear Department, Gedale, and the North Face Department. Shen Zichuan looked back. Connecting these places is the New Year gift I want to give to Amur. For things that Amul stole from Zhongbua, Shen Zichuan would not return, but he could make Amul compensation in another way. From the site of the Green Mouse Department to the site of the Huiyen Department, this line is right at the Chaosha River. Duanzhou doesn't have a thick enough defense wall. Shen Zichuan's fingertips swayed lightly. It happens that there is not a bear. The author has something to say. It's late. Today's plane is at 9 o'clock, and I can only go to the place at about 18 o'clock in the evening. I want to save a copy of today's draft overnight, but without success, I will cut off on the 5th for a day. The rain in Badu stopped, and Qi Juin should return. She received Hua Xiangyi at the gate of the palace, and the carriage was next to her, but she took the dove and said to Hua Xiangyi, "Let's go together." The rain in Badu stopped, and Qi Juin should return. She received Hua Xiangyi at the gate of the palace, and the carriage was next to her, but she took the dove and said to Hua Xiangyi, "Let's go together." Hua Xiangyi saw that Qi Juin's broken 5-beaded puppet still fell on the gold thread and hung in her hair, as it should have been, and couldn't see the handsome wolf howling if you could ignore the blue face. Qi Wei raised his hand and motioned for the carriage to follow him. When Qi Juin and Hua Xiangyi walked away, he followed closely. At this moment there was warm wind in the market, the crowd was bustling, and the smell of sweat and fried cooked food was mixed in the air. The spring flowers blooming in the distance seemed to be greasy, which made Qi Juin feel stuffy. "Do you eat?" Qi Juin passed by the sugarman's stall and asked Hua Xiangyi. "Next to this stall is the road. People are coming and going, and the dust is flying. Hua Xiangyi is the jewel of the flower family, and rarely goes out before reaching the capital, staying in the deep courtyard for pampering." She looked at Qi Juin. Qi Juin found out the remaining pieces of copper coins from her sleeve and flicked towards her, and said with satisfaction in the hum sound, "I have money. This street is not bright enough," but Qi Juin smiled at Qing Zi's lips, and the lanterns behind them turned on in sequence. She was like a 10-year-old girl who ran away from home to play without thinking about anything, so she remembered this sugar. Hua Xiangyi held the parcel, raised her finger, pointed to one of them, and said, "I want this." She was shy for this sentence, and her subtle emotions were hidden between her eyebrows, something she had never done, and something she would never do before. Qi Juin tossed the copper money to the hawker, then gave the sugar man Hua Xiangyi. She didn't care that she had no money, anyway she never had money, and the money could not be kept in her hands. Hua Xiangyi carefully pinched the sugarman, and she looked at the light and looked calmly. She once saw the sugarman in the gap passing by the car curtain across her servant. There is sugar in the palace, and the Queen Mother used to ask her to prepare for her. Qi Juin rubbed the bruises on her face with her fingertips. She looked at herself reflected in the water tank side by side through several ghost images. Qi Juin is noble, but Hua Xiangyi always doesn't feel like. She is open-minded like a cloud tourist. Hua Xiangyi stayed at Qidong for half a year and never saw Qi Juin's anger, as if there was nothing worthy of Qi Juin's anger. "Does the commander often come here?" Hua Xiangyi asked. "People who dare to put tiger skin money are here. I have all the money here to borrow money," Qi Juin said, removing the beads from her hair, and said with a pity, "The 5 beads it was awarded by the court. I have never dared to sell it. I knew it would be broken in the palace. I would rather sell it." Hua Xiangyi said, "Zhuangzi at home." Qi Juin didn't wait for Hua Xiangyi to finish, and said, "I just want to tell you today that you will take care of the Zhuangzi shop in the future. You will decide whether you rent or sell it." Facing Hua Xiangyi, we talk frankly. Qi Juin did not move the place of conversation to the tea house. She loves the market. Standing here is her attitude. She is not afraid to face anyone's eyes. Thank you for the 8-city granary. Qi Juin saluted slightly, her long hair followed her back, and she straightened up again. Otherwise this time it is dangerous. Hua Xiangyi turned sideways and said, The work is done. Qi Juin looked at her and said, Pan Yi didn't tell me, I just thank you. Hua Xiangyi was seen by Qi Juin as a sugarman. But I also bluntly, did you tell me what happened to the granary in the 8th city? Did you want me to do it for you? Qi Juin said it directly, and he didn't remember it. This Miss Hua-san is also very strange. Qi Juin turned around and did not want to understand why Hua Xiangyi wanted to disclose the matter of the granary to herself. If she hadn't mentioned it in the palace, this game would still be impossible. Hua Xiangyi hugged her white neck and looked at the sugar man in the voice. She said, The boss doesn't need to do anything for me, the boss. Just hit the sand. Qi Juin stared at Hua Xiangyi, suddenly holding her knees, and tilted her head to look at Hua Xiangyi's expression, wondering, That's it? Hua Xiangyi was taken aback by Qi Juin. This posture was the same as Qi Juin's picking up the hijab. He rushed directly to his eyes without giving Hua Xiangyi a chance to prepare. You helped Yao when you escaped in Badu. Qi Juin seemed to be awake, and felt that Hua Xiangyi was a little smelly, with the flower fragrance she expected. As a result, she was so diligent that when she returned, she found that Hua Xiangyi was still pinching the sugar man was calmly waiting for her to continue. Tell me about the granary again. Qi Juin concealed the talented wandering. Is it because of marrying my father? Hua Xiangyi said. The person who saved Yuan Zhuo inherited it. Qi Juin shook his head and said firmly, It's you. Hua Xiangyi has given credit to others for several times, and she seems to be unable to admit that the Queen Mother who blocked her boundary is the Empress. The afterglow of the street was swallowed up, and the lanterns seemed to fall like stars. The fried taste was a little bit stale, and the market was still sultry, and Huai was out of place here. As early as in Xianda, my aunt would ask me questions from time to time, the most frequently during spring plowing every year. Hua Xiangyi hangs down the sugar man, as if playing with the shadow of the past, she said. It is actually the account of balking. The more I calculated, the clearer I was. In Xiandanayan, I persuaded my aunt to let Jiang/Qingshan pass, but they thought that Jiang/Qingshan coordinated the 13 cities. In that year, Bo was so hungry in the wild. Liuzhou was ruined by the food released by the Baking city and killed too many people, she said, raising her head gently. It was more dead than when Bianxia slaughtered the city. Hua Xiangyi lives in the deep palace. She wears beautiful embroidery, food treasures, and sleeping satin, while the other end of the Zhu wall is covered with lotus roots, rice dumplings, and pillows. She followed the queen standing on the west floor, and the illusion of prosperity and blindness blinded her eyes, but she soon realized that these people did not want to stop. Hai Liangyi was killed in Minglatang, but the Queen Mother never thought about changing. Hua Xiangyi said, I want to stop my aunt. People are the rivers that carry boat. This is the foundation. The Queen Mother still wants to suppress the rumors by relying on bodying, which is against the sky. The rise and fall of rivers and mountains is not tied to the king at all. The world just needs an emperor heart who understands the pity of the world's hardships. I am trapped in a boudoir, and my ability is limited. Whether facing Yuan Zhuo or inheriting it, what I can do is trivial, Hua Xiangyi said here, and slowly returned a gift to Qi Juin. If it is possible to repel 12 Bianxia, that is meritorious. Therefore, I want the commander to walk out of Lidu alive. After receiving this gift, Qi Juin seemed to recognize who Hua Xiangyi was. You're a good woman. Qi Juin paused for a while. I should report on merit. The author has something to say. I have been working hard for a few days, and I will resume at 19 o'clock tomorrow. 2K Novel Reading Network. In the hot summer of May, the gentlemen couldn't bear the heat, and they all ate tea and cigarettes in Qi Xinting, shaking the folding fan fiercely. Yu Shao drank another herbal tea, which was not very comfortable at the moment. She was thinking about going to the hut, but she saw Fei Xing leading Hai Rigu to the courtyard. In the hot summer of May, the gentlemen couldn't bear the heat, and they all ate tea and cigarettes in Qi Xinting, shaking the folding fan fiercely. Yu Xiao drank another herbal tea, which was not very comfortable at the moment. She was thinking about going to the hut, but she saw Fei Xing leading Hai Rigu to the courtyard. Eri is going to cross the border in 2 days. Yu Xiao again wiped the sweat from her neck with a papa. Harigu will go with him. He's a scorpion, Kong Ling said, not eating cold food, sitting on the edge of the water curtain and enjoying himself. I can talk to the bear department. This is the meaning of the prince. Yu Xiao can no longer refute. He nodded, and sat beside Yao Wenyu, saying, I heard that people with a bear department are born strong, riding high horses, different from other tribes in the desert. Gao Zhongxiong hasn't seen a bear department. He stopped his pen, turned his head in the ink-dipped space, and waited for Yu Wenyu with Yu Xiao again. Yao Wenyu closed the book on his knees and said, The bear tribe is a large tribe in the southwestern part of the desert. Before Amur did not rise, the strongest tribe in the desert was the fierce tribe, followed by the bear tribe. Before the bear tribe stationed east of Suoxiangwan, they have their own horses, and they don't need pony horses with hooks. There are bear horses, also called bear horses, which are taller than the northern battle horses. Gao Zhongxiong originally thought that Yu Xiao was talking about rumors. He was shocked and said, I heard rumors of the bear ministry when I was a student. At that time, the lock was locked by Feng's Shuiguan's silver gun, Feng Yixing. If there was a bear ministry, it would be given by General Feng. Hit East. Yongyi's 4 generals are famous. Hong Yan Iron Wing Xiao Fengshu, Song County Tingachi Xiu, Bian County Feishu Lu Pingyan, and Shuiguan's silver gun Feng Yixing are the men most talked about in de Zurlang's early years. Feng Yixing and Xiao Fengshu are a way of life. He was born in Weiwei. At the age of 14, he pointed at the snowbound peak of the sky, and made an oath to be the iron wall of the copper wall of Dezhou. When he was 40, he buried himself under the snow peak. The remaining younger son eventually died in battle, leaving only his bones to the left son of left Chiaki. Yuan Zhuobo heard the strong knowledge, and even knew that there was a bear department. In fact, Qidong's earliest war horse was mixed with the bear horse. Kong Ling said, Wolf King Xiao Fengshu was a soldier in Luoxia Pass, Luoxia Pass. All the horses were transferred from Qidong, and they are also such horses. Oh, Yu Xiao exclaimed again, the waves are fierce. When Amur unified the 4 snakes, the horse, the hawk, and the squirrel, he wanted to have the bears return. Kong Ling felt cold, got up and returned to the table. They had a fight and Amur didn't discuss it. To the best. Now the other 3 people are all interested, and sit around Kong Ling. Gao Zhongxiong said. But there are 4 parts which will make the elite who suffers from the North Rail riding. The place is different. The bear department was still wandering around Suoxiangwan at that time. They occupied the high ground, and the serpent department was struggling to attack, and they would be beaten in front of others. Kong Ling laughed and said vividly, I saw that Xiefeng winding endlessly. There are always bears in the meantime. They held scimitars, arm-bound leather armor, and ran down from the top. They took the serpent department as a chest, and the serpent department rolled down and fell to the ground unconscious. Yu Xiao immediately sang, It's incredible! Yao Wenyu did not swallow a sip of tea, nearly sipped it out, covered her mouth and nose with a palm of her hand, and even coughed a few times before she eased over. Kong Ling said with a smile, It is really terrible. Amur lost his temper, and can only move the Green Mouse Department to Bian County. Yao Wenyu wiped and said, There are also bears and heroes. When General Feng was still alive, the man who confronted him at Suoxiangwan was called the Sukpa Beast. It was the Russia and Soviet Union of the bears. Gao Zhongxiong stepped forward and said, This person I know. Yuan Zhua, I don't know if you remember, I was in the tea house near Taishue a lot after listening to it. According to the legend of General Feng, he and this Sukpa beast are like. Just like the Wolf King and Amur. It's a hero, Kong Ling said. Without Amur, the position of the Serpent Department would be occupied by the Sukpa beast led by the Bear Department. He and Feng Yixing are both enemies and friends. There is such a thing in the tea house in Dengzhou for a while, I don't know if it was fabricated, and said that when Feng Yixing shot through the rainbow eagle flag that symbolized the dignity of Bianxia, the Sukpa beasts clapped together, and the two laughed at each other across thousands of horses. Say hello to each other first. Gao Zhongxiong held his pen, raised his posture, and learned the storyteller. General Feng does not have armor, but stands with his hands in the snow. He hunts in a white robe, isn't he chic? The general fisted and said loudly, Is Tiechi's grain cart ready? Gao Zhongxiong's posture was stagnant, and his open mouth was too late to close, and he saw that Kong Ling and others all stood up and saluted toward Shen Zichuan behind him. Ready, Kong Ling said. Fei Xing checked this morning and will be sent out of the city by Qiao Tianya later. Shen Zichuan tapped Gao Zhongxiong's back shoulder with a folding fan, and said, I am the bear-tiger Sukpa beast, and I have a horse cider in my hometown. The wine is very good. I want to wait for the general to finish the fight. Gao Zhongxiong hurriedly put the pen down and turned to salute the Fujian. Don't be nervous, Shen Zichuan said. It's the so-called de jour lang shui guan meng, who doesn't know how to lock the sky gun. Master used to listen to this paragraph. Hai Rigu stood at the entrance of the pavilion and said, The Sukpa beast has a bear and tiger, and I know him. Yu Shao again listened with interest and asked, What happened to these two? Kong Ling didn't answer. Hai Rigu picked up the fruit on the table, took a bite and said, The Sukpa beast killed Feng Yixing's young son and also killed Feng Yixing. He was driven away by Amur and left Suatian off. He stayed in Gedale for a while before retreating to the back of the Green Mouse Department. This is a strange person. Hai Rigu remembers the Sukpa beast, the legendary tiger hero. He played in Gadara and played drum dances every time he was drunk. This tall and majestic man's hair was white. He was not old yet, but seemed to be dead. I have a friend, Sukpa drinking in the flames. He drank my cider and killed my sons. I avenged him, and he left me. He turned the pouch upside down, empty. We are the eagles on both sides of Snow Peak, and will die in each other's hands. It's a pity that he died. Hai Rigu finished eating the fruit. He caught cold in Goodall and was too sick to get up. The snake department surrounded him, and he drank the horse in his account alone. Milk and finally took his machete to death on Gobi. Guggenhuz in the deer department cut off his head and dedicated it to Amur. Yu Shao said again and stopped talking. Everyone in Qi Xinting went silent. Guggenhuz leaned on the head of the Sukpa beast, making the deer department a friend of Amur, and he also became a friend of Hassan. A few years later, Xiao Fengshu's horseshoe broke Jurgenhuz's neck, and a few years later, Kong Ling didn't open his mouth. Hai Rigu went to the border county, and the governor still needs Huo Lingyun to go with him? Yao Wenyu skipped the topic and asked. Huo Lingyun doesn't go to Bai County. Shen Zichuan looked sideways outside Shui Curtain, who stood up and stood at Huo Lingyun. His flames are going north. The next day Xiao Qie took an iron ride across the country, and Shen Zichuan stood on the road in front of the city gate, watching Huang Sha tumbling. Hurricanes circled down, beeping twice above Shen Zichuan's head, then flying high again, rushing to the south. Fei Xing heard the thunder from the north rail riding, and came forward to block the yellow sand for Shen Zichuan. Shen Zichuan slightly erected the folding fan, and did not let Fei Xing stand in front of himself. Langtao Shulai wore heavy armor, exhaled the hot breath, and led the iron ride straight from the horse road. Shen Zichuan gradually smiled. As Xiao Qie approached, he lifted his right arm, wide sleeves slid down, revealing the arm restraint inside. Xiao Qie looked ahead without Lima. He dropped his arm when he passed Shen Zichuan and heard only a crisp sound. The two arms were banged next to each other, only wiped in the blink of an eye. The wind brought up Shen Zichuan's sleeve robe and he said, "Dajie." Xiao Qie laughed. He continued to push forward in the hot sun and said, "Great victory." The heat wave swept over, fascia rushed, and the two passed their arms without turning back. The author has something to say. I thank you for reading 2K Novel Reading Network. Bianjuan faced the desert, eroded by wind and sand, and rarely seen the sky when standing on the wall. The houses in the country are low, and when you look here, you will see the yellow wild earth. Green plants are rare along the way, and several crooked neck disease trees can be seen only a few miles away. The level of the grass between the gobi is uneven, like a master in the hall who is about to be bald when he is over half a year old. Bianjuan faced the desert, eroded by wind and sand, and rarely seen the sky when standing on the wall. The houses in the country are low, and when you look here, you will see the yellow wild earth. Green plants are rare along the way, and several crooked neck disease trees can be seen only a few miles away. The level of the grass between the gobi is uneven, like a master in the hall who is about to be bald when he is over half a year old. Xiao Qie's helmet was covered with layers of ash. He took off his helmet, turned his back to the setting sun, and looked at the border town walls floating in the sand waves ahead. It's really poor here. Hai Riga jumped off the horse and the accessories around his neck cracked. He unscrewed the water bladder, poured his head up to pour water on his face, and closed his eyes and said, "The scorpion is not here at all. Bian County has no fields, and the land under his feet is too barren. In the hot June, the signs of cracking have been exposed." Xiao Qie moved his army boots and looked at the worm crawling between the gaps in the loess. The grass field in the east of Suoxiangwan, which was obtained by Amor, was invaded by yellow sand and turned into a barren land in the first year of Xianda. Therefore, the Green Mouse Department abandoned it and returned to the east of Bian County. The prince asked me to talk to the Bear Department, but didn't give me a bait. This business requires brains, I don't. Hai Rigu is not honest. He knows how to negotiate, just like he talked to Yen Haru. This black scorpion knows the rules very well. Shen Zichuan did not give him a clear bait, which meant that he negotiated the business more cost-effectively, and the rewards were all calculated by Shen Zichuan, but he wanted to get a bargaining opportunity from Xiao Qie. Xiao Qie didn't look at Hai Rigu and said, "You better have." Hai Rigu touched the back of his neck a few times, which was a bit daunting. The water he poured on him soon disappeared, and the skin that was exposed to the sultry was bronzed. Hai Rigu screwed up the water bladder and continued, "I gave food for the Bear Department to winter, and they have enough food to stay in the territory. If you can only do this." Xiao Qie followed the shadows and set his eyes on the gate of Bianjuan. "That anyone can talk about this business." Hai Rigu bumped against the wall continuously, rubbed his unobstructed nose and said, "Well, I will give them a new choice. The gate of Bian County is opening." Qi Juin hung a knife around his waist and stood with his arms in front of the raised gate. She explored the road last night and returned at the end of the day. She only slept for 2 hours, looking tired and not so happy to see Xiao Qie. "Well," Qi Juin said, coming. Xiao Qie threw his waist card to Qi Juin. Qi Juin picked it up and didn't watch it. He handed the waist card to Qi Wei, and turned Xiao Qie into the city. "I came here in Xianda in 4 years, and Lu Guangbai said that he would plant trees." Xiao Qie's heavy armor was hot in the afterglow. He said, "Why is Bianjun still so barren?" "He wants to be beautiful." Qi Juin was sleeping with a sore neck, and now he slightly shook his head and watched the lights gradually lighting up in the market. Xianda has been windy and sandy for 6 years. He saved money and bought batches of seedlings with Huzhou. While the spring planted on the border, before the end of the month, let the cavalry step on. Hassan was stationed at the Green Mouse Department at the time. Xiao Qie stepped onto the stage, put his helmet aside, and sat here with Qi Juin, watching Tietchi enter the city. It's Hassan. Qi Juin didn't sit, she leaned against the door, dipped her chin in Yu Hui and said, "You let Zhao Hui's letter arrive long ago. You have to fight a hard battle in June, but only if Hassan really turns around and heads south. Raid Duanzhou. If he doesn't come, the 2nd Battalion of Shah will bear the consequences because of your troop transfer." Amor combined with the Hulu Department and is still persuading the Bear Department to surrender, and Hassan has little food left, said Xiaoqie. He must go to Duanzhou to get food. You have a scorpion, Qi Juin said. What does Shen Zichuan want to do? Hassan fights Duanzhou, and the reinforcements will stop at Guidal on the other side of the Chashi River. Only the bear can intercept me in the southeast. Xiaoqie extended his leg. Lanzhao wants to talk to the bear. Then he needs to show enough sincerity. Qi Juin stood upright, raised his arms and pointed to the remote Xiefeng to the south. Bear has a pasture in the south, and Shen Zichuan's granary can't feed them. You can't even imagine their greed. Qi Juin, no, starting with Qi Xiu, Qidong tried to negotiate with the Bear Department, hoping that they could rely on Dezhou like the North Face Department, but it was too difficult. The Bear Department was the strong department, and they had nothing with the Face Department. They are completely different. They believe that their machete and bear horse can grab better land, so they don't even buy Amor's account. Lan Zhouken gave them the territory of the Serpent Ministry, Xiaoqie said. They wandered around after leaving Suo-Xiangguan. This is what they want most. Qi Juin squatted down and said to Xiaoqie, "Yes, you are too smart. Some bears do want land, but are you a great desert monk? Shen Zichuan's trick with Dezhou people at Zhongbua is useless here. The bears do eat the painted bread. I deal with them, they are far more cunning than the snake department." Li Bear caught a four-legged snake under his eaves. He knelt on a smooth wooden board, leaning on the tail of the four-legged snake, and said to Ding Tao, "Bake it, it's delicious." Ding Tao cross-legged, holding a pen to write and draw, Conger glanced at the four-legged snake, and said disgustingly, "Gee." Li Bear shook the four-legged snake gently and said, "This is the snake of Goodall." For a long time, Ding Tao did not hear Li Xiong mentioning Gedale and lay in shock. He clasped Ben and looked at the four-legged snake. "Isn't this the same as the four-legged snake in Izaki?" Li Xiong sniffed in the air and said, "Not the same, this one has a taste, a desert flavor, yellow sand. It all came out of Goodall." Ding Tao held his chin, pretending to be deep. "It must be that Goodall has a hard time, or it's most comfortable to stay here." Li Xiong said, "No, it likes to stay." Fei Xing stood there and shouted Ding Tao. Ding Tao got up and ran over without listening to Xiong's words. The sugar in his knees dropped to the ground. "Stay in the old place." Li Xiong looked at Ding Tao, reached out and picked up the sugar, put his brain in his mouth and said vaguely, "I also like to stay in the old place." The current leader of the Bear Department is called Durantai. He is not a relative of the Sukpa beast, but a relative of the Sukpa beast. After Sukpa's death in Goodall, Durantai fled to the back of the Green Mouse Department with the remaining spirit of the Bear Department and stayed there for many years. Dalantai sat in front of the tent, took out the potatoes from the bonfire, broke it, and ate it on dried horse meat. He has a thick beard and looks funny when chewing. He was not as mighty and majestic as the Sukpa beast. He was very short, not as short as a man with a bear. "Wise man walking in the desert, you rode a horse to my tent and brought the eagle's advice." Dalantai swallowed the hot potatoes and looked at the bark by the campfire. "But the eagle's the request is too much." The bear leader under the snowy peak, Bayan Pan sat saluting toward Dalandai. "I bring the most sincere greetings of the eagle, and the requirements are negotiable, and the eagle treats you as friends." Hassan is the eagle of the snake department. He sent the wise man Bayan long before Xiaoqie left. Dalantai divided the other half of the potatoes into Bayan, saying, "The wolf cubs from the north are young and strong. I heard that he killed Hu Helu and Achi, and defeated the eagle proud in Chashir Tienkung. Scorpion. I'm old and can't ride a horse. I'm afraid I can no longer fight such young people. Bayan took the potatoes with both hands, hesitated for a few moments and said, You are the bear of the tiger Sukba beast. You are leading a bear department to the southeast of the desert, and it is hard for the snake department to provoke it. The eagle firmly believes that you are powerful. The wolf cub from the north is too young. He is far worse than the wolf king. If that's the case, Dalantai wiped his beard. So why didn't the eagle that cut off the head of the wolf king have slaughtered the wolf? Dalantai did not lie. He was really old, his hair was not gray, and his hands were no longer able to hold the knife for a long time. Although he did not have the spirit of Sukba beast, he was able to weather the blizzard with a bear part and maintain the dignity of the strong part in the desert. He is not a person like Huhelu, he is more like a wise man than Bayan. That's why the eagle sent me to find you, Bayan said. Our mighty cavalry hasn't broken the line of defense from the north rail. It's not strong enough, but there is no food. The wolf king is dead, respectful and full. The wise Dalantai, you also see the future of the desert. We are about to step into a new territory, where all the clans will no longer be hungry. This is the wish of Great Russia, Soviet Union and Japan, and the wish of the eagle. We need your help. The potatoes buried in the campfire scented, and Dalantai poked them with a tree branch, and was not impressed by the respect of Bayan, saying, A few years ago, Gaganhuz of the deer department used unwise means in Gudel, killed my monarch, and dedicated the head of the tiger to Amor, and Amor did not refuse. He picked up a potato again, but did not open it, but wiped the dust on it with his rough fingertips. Amor is a greedy vulture. He is not our brother. Sitting at the other end was a bear warrior who stood up, which meant to be a guest. Bayan didn't move. He faced Dalantai and said, Dear Dalantai, it was all our stupid mistakes in the past. Now we have our common enemy. Who forced the enemy to wake up? Dalantai looked at Bayan like a line of eyes. Amor intends to conquer all corners of the sun, and for this reason he has forced us to leave our homeland in such a shameless way. You are stupid. The next boy actually described the murder as a stupid mistake. Bayan said, I apologize for my words, Dalantai. The light around them was blocked by bears. They stood around and looked at Bayan's eyes as if they were looking at an antelope. Hassan wants our help. He should beg for our forgiveness. Dalantai peeled the potatoes. If Hasankan killed his wife and made the deer hybrid pay the price, we agreed to send him aside. County. Don't do this. Bayan has been dragged up and he raised his voice. Gaganhuz is dead. Doran is an innocent girl. Dalantai looked at Bayan and swallowed the potato alone. Chagan knelt reverently in his tent. His pale hair dangled on the ground, begging, Dear Russian, Soviet Union and Japan, the bear department is the most cunning bear in the desert. The food you need, our deer department will double supply. Chagan knelt reverently in his tent. His pale hair dangled on the ground, begging, Dear Russian, Soviet Union and Japan, the bear department is the most cunning bear in the desert. The food you need, our deer department will double supply. Big Russian, Soviet and Japanese Amor stared at the letter in the palm of their hand. Hassan was a bit similar to him, but he was rougher and stronger than Hassan. Amor put down the letter and gently scratched the growing stubble with his thumb, like a man who could be drunk at the road at any time. There is a saying in Dezhou, called acting within your means, Amor said in a low voice. I thank you for your zeal, but my friends in your flocks have been sent to the battlefield, and so on. This winter, the deer department will starve a lot of people. Shagan's kneeling body looked humble. He said, I'd rather use all my cattle and sheep for a long life of Doran. Amor raised his head slightly, his fingers sliding along the knot of his throat, grinning, Chagan, you heard those winds. My son killed the Sukba beast. If Dalantai wants to give back his teeth, then I can donate my head. The Hulu department is willing to pay for his own work. Chagon raised his body, and Huang Sha turned his old face was black and yellow, and he said, "But he can't take my daughter. Doran is the only daughter of Chagon, she is the pearl of Hulu. There are no strong horses or volcanic eagles in the deer section, but they have the sanctuary given by the Chidi. The deer department lives in the depths of the desert and has the most fertile oasis in the desert, Chidi Lake. In the legend, they were children who grew up drinking the milk of the Chidi gods. When Dolan was born, she had the eyes of Chidi Lake. The deer department regarded her as the dew in the morning. She was the freest girl in the entire desert. Dori Lan married Hassan. She is no longer the pearl of Chidi Lake, but the pearl of the 6 deserts." Amur stood up, holding his hands, and his broad shoulders carried the sunlight leaking in. "If Harsan can't even protect his wife, he's not worthy of being a Doran's husband and not being followed by the deer department. Chagon, my good friend, stand up, hold your machete and stare that kid. He dares to take your daughter seriously, and you can kill him." Chagon scratched his head, and the wrinkles carved between his foreheads arrived on the ground, saying, "I follow Great Russia, Soviet Union and Japan, and I firmly believe that the eagle Hassan will not betray Doran because his father is the most brave in the desert. Warrior." Amur walked slowly, and when he got to the tent curtain, he was still scratching his throat. His eyes were looking at the yellowish sky, the afterglow spread, the old fingers rolled over the knot, revealing the scars left there. This was the mark left by Xiao Fangxiu in the Hongyandong Mountains more than 10 years ago. A bear department was blinded by the snow-closed wind, and Durantai was still indulging in their glory in the past. Amur looked back and said to Chagon, "Without the tiger Sukba beast, the bear department can't stop me at all." Hassan. Bayan received a reply from Hassan. He looked quickly and drank a bowl of milk tea after reading. He sat in front of the territory with the bear department, just in the wilderness, with books on his knees, and asked Dalantai to see him again. A bear warrior waved at him and drove out, "Get away." Bayan drew a line in front of his knee with his finger and said, "I am in the territory of the Green Mouse Department, and I have not offended you." The soldier said, "You blocked us from peeing. Are you going to pee like a livestock in front of God?" Bayan read, "As long as Durantai sees me again, this Gobi can give you a pit." Bayan is a wise man. He is carrying a book, which is the wisdom eyes of the gods walking in the desert. As long as he is unwilling, no one can take off his pants and pee in front of him. Achi and Hu and Lu did not respect Bayan, so they both died, which made Bayan more mysterious. This is Bayan's 5th day here, and Dalantai finally agreed to see him again. Bayan picked up the book and said to Dalantai, "Dear, the North Rail Rider has arrived in Bien County, and there is not much time left for Hassan." Dalantai took off his boots and stepped on the Lus barefoot. "Did he kill his wife?" Bayan enveloped Hassan's reply and was ready to hand it over. Dalantai raised his hand to stop. He shook his head and said, "I don't recognize the words, you read them." "Eagle wants me to tell you," Bayan said. Bayan spoke halfway, and heard the sound of a horseshoe not far away. Dalantai stood up, and before he walked forward, he saw a jujube horse rushing in, stepping in the territory with a bear department, and finally stopped in front of Dalantai. "I heard at the shore of Chidi Lake that the respected Dalantai wanted my head." Duran clutching her horsewhip, watching Dalantai and the horse's restless step. "You want to take the tiger Su the Herba came to threaten my husband, so I should ask for my consent first. So you rushed to my territory." Dalantai admired the rumored red flower. "Did you decide to use your own head to win this victory for your husband?" Bayan rose to his feet, watching the fighters in the territory stand up. He hurried to approach, raised his arm and guarded Doran's horse and said to Dalantai, "No, this is not what the eagle means. My brother killed your monarch." Doralan raised the back of her hand and wiped the dust on her face. She ran for several days in a row. "Gaganhuz is the best brother in the world, but he doesn't deserve to be called a hero. You want to take revenge for Sukba Beast, you can take my head, but this is the grudge of the bear and the deer, not the grudge of you and Hassan, you should tell me. Doran said, and threw the dagger around her waist to the ground. I am willing to confess my death to the Bear Department for the recklessness of Gegenhaz. Durantai is a good man. He picked up this dagger and killed me, and our dear department paid off this debt. Delantai picked up this small dagger, which was exquisite and beautiful, inlaid with cat's eyes, just like Doran, with a sharp but innocent beauty. You have courage. If Gegenhaz had the courage like you, the bear and the deer can become brothers many years ago. There is no if in this world. You take my head to sacrifice the tiger, and then pick up your machete to follow the eagle. Durlan rolled over and dismounted, shaking her skirt in the night breeze. She walked to Lantai ahead. The opportunity to have a bear department is at this moment. Delantai spread his palms, holding the dagger of Doran, as if full of blooming flowers. He looked at Doran, and strangely, he looked as if looking at his daughter. The howling wind in the night blew the flag of the Bear Department, and Dalantai said victoriously, "Stupid girl, this account is not over." Bayan took the opportunity to say, Eagle can promise to Dalantai that regardless of whether the Bear Ministry is willing to send troops to Bibian County, he is willing to return the Bear Ministry's homeland, and give the Bear Ministry's own cattle and sheep as a replacement. Lube apologized for the injustice. But if Dalantai insists on taking his wife, he will bet on his life, and he will never die without a bear. Dalantai's eyes narrowed at all times, and he heard similar words. Hai Rigu sat in the tent, and 2 days ago, he respectfully said to him, the Prince of Zhongbua extended his arms to Dalantai. We are willing to regain the homeland for the Bear Department. Before that, Duanzhou also returned will provide enough food for the bears. These people all know that there is a Bear Department who wants to return to their homeland. They prefer to stay in the old place and guard the snow peak for Sukba Beast. Dalantai shook his palm and said kindly and briskly, There is a Bear Department who has got what he deserves, and he will fight for you. He gave Hai Rigu the same answer. 2 hours later, the stars fell flat and flat. 2 hours later, the stars fell flat and flat. Xiao Qie stood on the sand dunes and drank his remaining horses. The spirits rushed into his throat, and he swallowed slowly, leaving the spiciness in his mouth for a long time. After night, the wind will intensify, and Huang Sha buried the horseshoes of the waves, and after 2 minutes, Xiao Qie saw the returning Harigu. Hai Rigu dismounted, took off the veil covering his mouth and nose, and sifted a few mouthfuls of sand, saying, Dalantai agreed. Xiao Qie didn't say anything. Chen Yang behind him asked, What conditions did you say? We gave him the grass field in the east of Tianguan Pass, which is the hometown of the Bear Department, and Dalantai wanted to go back. You gave them wide grass fields. Xiao Qie repeated. Hai Rigu raised his hands slightly, and said to Xiao Qie, The prince wants to give the territory with the Bear Department and the Snake Department, which is more fertile, and I think my negotiation is more cost-effective. The territory of the Snake Department is close to the north. Moving the Bear Department there is easier to control. This is the result Lanzhou wanted, but you push them back to the east of Xiefeng. Xiao Qie put the wine bag, tightened it, and threw it to Chen Yang next to him. No eyes on the east side of Xiefeng can stare at them. Hai Rigu followed a few steps and followed behind Xiao Qie, saying, With the Bear Department nostalgic, the territory of the Snake Department is no longer fertile, and it is difficult to shake their determination. Second Lord, only the east side of Xiefeng can impress Dalantai. Moreover, the grass fields there are almost gone. After all, they still have to migrate north. You are playing with a flower gun. Chen Yang leaned against his chest and blocked Hai Rigu. He raised his arms to keep away from him, and did not allow Hai Rigu to continue chasing Xiao Qie. You didn't talk to Dalantai about the Mouse Department. Territory. As a bait, the territory of the Green Mouse Department is also a chip of Zhongbua. In Shin Zichuan's budget, Hai Rigu should first talk to Delantai about the territory of the Green Mouse Department, and finally throw out the territory of the Serpent Department, but Hai Rigu did not in doing so. He knows how to make a profit for himself. He wants to use Kasano on the east side of Xiefeng to replace the territory of the Serpent Department and leave this fertile land to the Black Scorpion he led. Xiaoqia was on the horse. Chen Yang was still blocking Hai Rigu. Hai Rigu couldn't push Chen Yang away. He walked irritably in the place, and opened Chen Yang's arms helplessly, saying, "You should talk to Dalantai yourself, and see if he will go according to your guess." Chen Yang Daijing, who had a miserable sword in Harry, said, "He has left as you guessed. You want the territory of the Serpent Ministry, and the monarch will naturally give it to you, but not in this way. You stay I've been with the prince for so long, but I do ain't know your master at all." Hai Rigu likes not wanting to quarrel with Chen Yang. He turns around and faces Chen Yang. Chen Yang stepped back to chase Xiaoqia's horse. Harry faced Hirano in ancient times, and said at the moment in Biantia, "You are very religious as a dog." After turning back, he smiled at Chen Yang as if nothing had happened. Chen Yang stepped on the saddle and smiled at the sea. When he turned the horse's head, he also answered in the Lansha words, "The hybrid envious eyes are also very religious." Fuck. Hai Rigu was taken aback by Chen Yang's whispering words approaching the serpent accent. Before he got here, no one at Zhongbua could understand his whispering words. "I don't have much to do, but it's fast to learn whispering. You learned the accent of the eagle in Gadel, but it's not very good." Chen Yang said politely, "I bark you again, head." Hai Rigu was taken by surprise, nodded obediently, watching Chen Yang leave, raising his face to the dust. Xiaoqia returned to Bian County and did not find Qi Juin in the account. He went around and saw the commander in another account. Qi Juin awoke, listening to the movement, and leaned out to whistle Xiaoqia. Xiaoqia held the wolf and sword, neither was it to enter, nor was it to retreat. The rouge between Qi Juin's lips was smeared halfway, and the little belly of her two little thumbs were stained with this little red, but she was not painting it herself, but she leaned over and handed it to Hua Xiangyi. Hua Xiangyi raised her body and carefully applied the rouge on the lip. "This color is so beautiful," Hua Xiangyi's voice was soft and tender. "It's a good match for the commander, and it's inconspicuous at night." She painted the last point and asked Xiaoqia with a side smile, "Doesn't it look good?" Xiaoqia crossed his arms and looked for a long while. He hesitated and said, "Okay." Qi Juin is not without makeup. She often wears makeup when she is at home or when she is going to a banquet. However, despite Xiaoqia's excellent eyesight, she can't see that this rouge is different from what the coach usually wears. "You don't understand." Hua Xiangyi pointed her finger away from the lap on her knees, which contained a small mirror with hollow beads, which she picked up and held it to Qi Juin. Qi Juin wiped her hands on the papa. She could only see her lips and chin in the mirror. She laughed and said, "It looks good." Xiaoqia waited for a while. Qi Juin lowered the curtain and came out. "Madam is here to settle the bill for me," Qi Juin said. Xiaoqia coughed into the open night and said, "Oh." Xiaoqia looked at Qi Juin. "The coach is young, but not young, at least for women. She has already passed the marriageable age." Xiao Jiming and Lu Guangbai had a good relationship with her, but did not ask about her marriage, because everyone knew that Qi Juin could not marry. Miss 3 calculated it well. "I heard it when I was in the capital. Your account at the house is cumbersome, and her help is even more powerful." The queen fell. She was no better than Qidong in the past. Shui Yanqing finished the investigation of the city of Yunqing, and the flower family was in danger, and she was not allowed to stay by my side. I was afraid the ant in the family would make trouble. Instead of following this explanation, she teased, "Also, I like girls so much." Xiaoqia stood still, and the two had already boarded the city wall. "Your scorpion is back," Qi Juin said. Xiaoqia pointed to the southeast and said, A bear department is willing to make way for you. They want to retreat to the grass field in the east of Suoxiangwan and return to the original place. Qi Zhuin's raised face was reflected in the firelight. Hua Xiangyi said it well. This color of rouge was inconspicuous and was stained by the night, just like Qi Zhuin's original color. She looked playful and said, "Dalantai is stupid. It is only a fool's job to abandon the site of the Green Mouse Department and return to the east side of the snow wind that has been buried by the yellow sand." "He's not stupid," Xiao Qia said. "He gave you the way. He wants you to go to Geedle. When you get to Geedle, he just stuck your retreat. What did he say to you at that time?" "Anything is fine. Natalantai is still a fool, because you and I can see such an easy-to-understand tactic." Qi Zhuin tapped her arm with her fingertips, and she looked into the night. "You have been mixing with Lu Guangbai for a long time. You learned it's all his rustic. Standing on the ground, he wants to dig the ground 3 feet, and he can't wait to remember the terrain of thousands of miles in his heart, but ignore the tribe itself." Qi Zhuin bypassed Xiao Qia. She supported the wall stack, flipped it lightly, stepped on the gap, and bent over to check the crossbow. "Durantai gave way to me, and I guess he wouldn't stop. There are not so many soldiers in the bear department, and Dalantai can only choose to concentrate his forces, otherwise he can't resist the attack from either party." Xiao Qia thought about Su Yan and said, "You mean Dalantai wants to concentrate his forces on attacking other places?" "I left Bianjuan. The 40,000 garrison here would have to go halfway. Without Lu Guangbai, there would be no generals who could fight back and forth with them. When would you wait without attacking?" Qi Zhuin said. "That wouldn't be worth it, sister," Xiao Qia said. "Since Dalantai is not strong enough, then he killed Bianjuan, and you will return soon. He will also be attacked by the Tsangjuan garrison in the rear. He couldn't keep Bianjuan. He went to the trouble to get here, not just for food like Hassan." Qi Zhuin straightened up, and her hair was disturbed by the wind when she turned her head. Instead of continuing her deductions like Lu Guangbai, she said, "Let's try it out." After Xiao Qia left the battlefield, he was tired from the north, but Hassan's onslaught didn't abate, and Lu Guangbai could only press the tune to keep Luoshan intact. The eagle eye of Duanzhou could not see the Chaosha River, and Hua Lingyun quietly left Duanzhou at this time. Hua Lingyun's team had very few people. They were all Jiniwei. They were quiet, carrying simple bags, and riding a pony captured from Achi. They rested at sunrise, moved after sunset, and walked north along the Chaosha River. The wind tonight was very dry, and Hua Lingyun drank the last drop of water in the water bag. He wiped his mouth and sat on horseback looking forward. If only the nasty ghost of Fei Xing was there. Hua Lingyun hung the water bladder back to his horse. He didn't have the insight of Fei Xing. He seemed very dull in the night, but could only act at night. "Where are we going?" Following Hua Lingyun's genie way, he took off the wind collar and filled the water. "We have been going north for 5 days. We'll stay here," Hua Lingyun said. "You can go out with your eyes closed. When they walk north to the place near Shasanying, they will return, but they will not return to Duanzhou, but will continue to follow the original road to the north." Genie Wei said nothing. They were reprimanded by Qiao Tianya before leaving, so no one refuted Hua Lingyun on the way. The pony is very endurable and walks on the Gobi Desert for several days without fatigue. Their stiff necks look stupid, but Genie Wei has become accustomed to the speed that does not match his appearance. "This is a good horse." Hua Lingyun stopped by the river when it was dawning. He let his horse drink water and squatted beside himself to wash his face. The river was cold in the morning, and it was shocking to hit his face. Hua Lingyun opened the water bladder, dart into the river, and suddenly saw the dark red color rolling out in the sound of guru. His chin's fingers touched the cold but soft thing, and the dark red rose with black hair. "Dead man." Genie Wei, who was also washing his face, sighed, dragged his hair, and dragged the body out of the water. Hua Lingyun turned over the body, and the face of the body was swollen. He wrung out the mud to identify the body. The armor was cut off, Jiniwei said quickly. People are dying high. Huo Lingyun ripped off his clothes and stood up suddenly, saying, "This is Tiechi." An iron ride ran on the road from Luoshan to Shasanying. He was trembling in the bumps, leaving long blood on the ground where the horseshoe passed. The helmet covered his face. He was just an unknown soldier. His lips moved, but he could only make a sound. Horse! The horse rushed into the post 50 miles south of Shasanying, and he planted it and fell to the ground. Please ask the racecourse. He persisted here, and died before he had finished speaking. As long as he arrives here is victory. The iron ride of the post will immediately spread the news to the Shasan battalion, and the reinforcements will go south. However, there was a dead silence in the station, and there were corpses everywhere, including the eagles in the eagle room. The heat wave floated, not even the sound of birds. Huo Lingyun turned on her horse, held the reins and said, "Go to Luosha Station." Huo Lingyun turned on her horse, held the reins and said, "Go to Luosha Station. Luoshan racecourse is too far, even the short stallion can't reach it. Huo Lingyun can only choose the nearer Luosha post station, which is close to Shasanying, which is the supply station for Luoshan and the north." The horse's wheezing began to worsen, the weather was too hot, and Jinyui's strong body had to rely on watering to avoid heat stroke. Huo Lingyun ran from the Chasha River to the northwest, and ran for 2 full hours. When the station was seen, it was completely dark. "Dead man." Jiniwei raised his finger and shaved his nose and said, "All here are dead people." An iron rider planted in front of the open door of the post. He had been dead for a few hours. Blood and water had soaked the ground, and his body covered in heavy armor was about to stink soon. Jiniwei dismounted, did not flip Tiechi's body, squatted to examine for a moment, and said to Huo Lingyun, "This is a man." Huo Lingyun looked at the arrow on Tiechi's back and nodded. Tiechi had 2 arrows on his back, and he closed the eyes with the 2 arrows galloping to the post. Jiniwei stood up, covered his mouth and nose, and shone the torch forward with his other hand, saying, "Here." His voice stopped abruptly. There were corpses and corpses in the station, and the post was hung on the flagpole, as if it was a tack hanging in the silent night. Huo Lingyun took the torch, looked closer, and found that Yan's head was cut off. "The horses were hacked to death," said Jiniwei, who illuminated the stables. "Even if there was a life, the Luoshan and Shasanying camps could not be reached before dawn. The eagles were dead." The door of the eagle room was not closed tightly, and the eagles who had not broken off their anklets had their necks broken. The Luosha post had no live mouth, and the wild dogs fed here were hacked to death. Biancha cavalry has been here. Huo Lingyun held the torch and was lost in thought. After the Luoshan racecourse was established, it became the prototype of the North and Central Bow News Hub, so Shen Zichuan repaired it to be extremely solid. There are 800 people stationed at the Luosha post station. There are not only the North Rail riding, but also the China Boss Guard, which is equivalent to a small military camp. Emergency reporting points have been set up on the 4-way road, and Wanglu can follow on 3 sides. A few days ago, Lu Guangbai asked Luosha Road to be more vigilant. There was no negligence. "The cavalry is good at raids," Jiniwei said. "Bianbua Camp." Huo Lingyun suddenly turned around and repeated, "Bianbua Camp." Bianbua Camp. Last June, the Biancha cavalry raided Bianbua Camp, which was to detour from the south and borrow the Luoshan road. Shen Zichuan and Shao Chia later blocked that road, but eastward near the Chashi River, it was impossible to block it. The Biancha cavalrymen came here in Xiandinian and knew the terrain here. The station connects Luoshan and Shashan Battalion, just stepping on the road that the cavalry used to lead to Luoshan. Huo Lingyun jumped up the steps, opened the door. "They can avoid their eyes and sneak in here, and certainly not many people come." Jiniwei took a hand and put down the post on the flagpole. "The scorpion is likely to sneak in. Whether it was a scorpion or not, Hassan truncated the post, or did not want to let the news of Luoshan's attack spread to the north. He was delaying the time of reinforcements. However, this group of attacking Biancha cavalry did not stop. According to the direction of the horse road, Huolingyun guessed that Hassan intends to let these people continue to go south and cut off the connection between Dunzhou and Duanzhou directly, so that Duanzhou was isolated and helpless. Situation. This is closer to the 3rd Battalion of Sha. Huolingyun turned to the lower stage, blew his whistle, called his horse. We continue to go north. We can reach the 3rd Battalion of San before dawn, and ask for help from the north. Huolingyun could not reach Dunzhou. He could only choose one way, that is, to let the Shasanying's North Railway ride immediately south to support Duanzhou. However, this means that Duanzhou and Tuanzhou have lost all news, especially Duanzhou, which is the first to suffer. As long as the Shasanying support is wrong, Duanzhou will be destroyed. Huolingyun whimpered his horse. His time is urgent and must be fast. Geniways chasing stars and galloping like a gallop, they broke the silence on the road and moved quickly in the shadow of the tree. Huolingyun's breathing was short, because for a long time, he had a spicy pain on the inner thigh. The saddle was damp and sweat soaked their cheek. They had no time to rest for a few days like tight strings. Fast. Huolingyun tightened his whip and raised his arm in the bumps, but before he hit it, the horse under his seat hissed. His forefoots merged, and his knees were planted. Huolingyun immediately hugged her head and rolled down. The ghosts ran in the shadows of trees on both sides of the road, and Huolingyun's carp stood up and pulled out the knife. Hearing the rapid footsteps, broke through the bushes and pounced on himself. "Trip Maso!" shouted Jiniwei, who followed him. "Ambush!" Huolingyun blocked the knife, but it was useless, and the opponent directly knocked him out with his body. He leaned across the ground and rolled to the root of the tree. There was a rush of wind behind him. Huolingyun grabbed the roots of the tree with one arm, slid up, raised his legs, and avoided a knife. "Scorpion!" "No," Huolingyun gritted his teeth and said, "it's a cavalry. The elite of the snake department." Elite moved his steps quickly in the envelope, like a closed net. The sound of the sha-sha footsteps was abnormally neat, like a twisted snake, and even the traces left when passing through the sand were exactly the same. The machete on the left slashed towards Jiniwei's knee, but was unexpectedly blocked by the bang sound of the embroidered spring knife. Jiniwei's petals were on the cavalry's chest, followed by a drawn sword, and he spun to the ground. When the bottom of the boot touched the ground, the blade edged like a flash of sky, breaking the cavalry's throat, and then they stepped on the ground and turned back on the horse. The whole set of actions is done in one go. The elites who did not succeed took a half step back, and some of them touched their throats and said, "Jiniwei." Jiniwei turned over the back of the knife and wiped the blood on the back of the blade while sliding his arm. He said, "Jiniwei? Ladies are now called Jinichi." Huolingyun's horse couldn't stand up in fright. He flew a few steps, caught Jiniwei's outstretched arm, and jumped onto Jiniwei's horse. "I can't wait to leave the north." Jiniwei drew the reins in the siege. "Biancha still has an ambush here. We haven't had enough time to reach the 3rd Battalion of Sha." Back to, Huolingyun didn't finish talking, so he held the knife in both hands, slammed the blade into a semicircle, and smashed the scimitar suddenly. "Back to Duanzhou. Can't go north. U-turn." Huolingyun hurriedly wiped the sweat from her face. "South to the south." Hassan was too cautious. He slaughtered the Luosha post station without even letting the horses and eagles, but left the elite on the northward pavement to beware of the fish that might be caught. But this also gave Huolingyun a chance, and Hassan left a small number of elites here. "Fuck," Jiniwei shook off the blood on the knife surface. "This knife is still from Yusi, and I've thrown it away." The horses were hoofing in place, Jiniwei was pulling the reins, and he just fell off his head. The cavalry on the side had swooped up, and the saddle slid to the right. The horse could not stand the gravity and followed. Huolingyun bent his elbow and hit the cavalry's face. The cavalry on the left climbed up like a locust, and Jin Wei caught the machete and was turned over by the force. Jin Wei fell to the ground and several scimitars suddenly hooked. He tried his best to scream, holding his embroidered spring sword with both hands, and lifted up in the rubbing sound of the stinging ears, and the blue muscles on the back of his hands suddenly appeared. I can't hold it. Jin Wei was carrying the weight of a few people, lying on the ground with his neck up, breathing heavily, sweating like rain, jumping with his forehead abruptly, shouting hard, "Brother! Up!" Huolingyun ran away with his horse. Jin Wei was almost discouraged and scolded, "Your mother!" Huolingyun hit the cavalry against the horse, and his tight lips were salty. It was not sweat but a bite. After running some distance, he suddenly turned around, inserted the knife back into the sheath, and then drove straight back. The horseshoe broke through the superimposed figure. Jin Wei's lowered arm couldn't stop him, and the cavalry's head was close to his face. At the very moment, the pungent scent slammed into the nostrils, and the deafening explosion accompanied the splashing plasma, spraying Jin Wei's face. Huolingyun leaned down and took Jin Wei's hand and took the man back to his horse. Break through! Huolingyun was so excited. He took the smoking fire and rushed out towards the south, shouting, "Break!" Yin Chong drank his neck and drank his wine. He finished drinking, drank several wine bowls in a row, lay on the wall pile and asked the goalkeeper below, "Are there any? This wine is delicious." The gatekeeper walked a few steps and saw Yin Chang's face through the fire and moonlight, and said, "No, you young and old, drink, this is still in rotation. I won't drink it at rest." Yin Chang's feet were a little soft. He shook drunkenly and looked at the wall-stacked torches. "Well, how can there be less bows and arrows? Come on, make up." Before Fei Xing reached the city wall, he heard Yin Chang yelling. He kicked the newly brewed wine store underneath the crossbow with his feet, pulled the cloth around, and then went up aggressively, holding Yin Chang's back collar, and said, "Make up, people will come and make up immediately, you go back to sleep." Yin Chang's heel slipped on the ground, so he was taken away, rubbed a few red noses, and complained, "Isn't General Liu here yet? I waited for a few days and wanted to see him again. I drank all the wine, it's been several rounds." Yin Chang went to the battlefield with Shao Chia last time. When he saw Lu Guangbai, he was very excited. He drank and drank Guangbai to drink. He spit 3 times a night, and lay in a tent and slept the next day. Zhuo Qianxiu said nothing, and immediately sent Yin Chang back. Fei Xing couldn't bear the smell of wine. He waved his palm, twisted his nose and said, "Don't say that, I can't afford to lose this person." Yin Chang was unwilling, waving his arm, raising his neck to see Fei Xing, and shouting, "Drinking you a shame? Well, the old man hasn't even thought you shame." Fei Xing dragged people to the bottom, changing the waist with the duty room. These days, the patrol is strict, and he took some time to sign. Yin Chang took the opportunity to look for wine, sniffed around with an unscentable nose, and muttered, "Where is it hiding? Here it is." He rolled up his robe corner, knelt on the ground, and rubbed his and looked under the crossbow on the bed. Fei Xing is still tender. Yin Chang tilted his head, and he went in to drink enough and said, "My little boy, oh so far, oh." Fei Xing turned his head, put his pen aside, and prepared to call the old man to stop, but at this moment he heard a very thin click sound. His ears were so sensitive that the sound of the wind could be heard clearly, and he had to tilt his head and listen again calmly. The flag fell and the wind stopped near the gate. Yin Chang finally got enough wine, but instead of digging out, he kept his posture on the ground, smelling the smell of the land. When Fei Xing didn't respond, he yelled, "Enemy attack!" The heavy stone of the trebuchet slammed into the wall, the dust splattered. Fei Xing hugged his head to avoid the debris, and listened to the alarm from the upper floor. The garrison lifted its drumsticks, smashed them, and shouted, "The enemy is attacking, the enemy is going to get up." Fei Xing pushed away the soldiers, rushed up the city wall, and breathed in air when he saw the front of Duanzhou clearly. Yin Chang got up and patted the passing army with a scabbard. He said sharply, "Ignite the beacon and quickly report it to the monarch." Yin Chang stepped on the city gate and pulled Fei Xing. "With your waist card, lead Genie to pack his bags and protect the monarch and you." Yin Changtong's red nose was drawn twice. He didn't look at the outside of the city and pointed to Lanjiantai on the side. The smoke of the fire ignited. "Shaoxing, you will protect the governor westward and go to Dunzhou." Shen Zichuan was not asleep yet, holding his eyebrow under the lamp, listening to Kong Ling talking about the dam, listening to the courtyard suddenly chaos. Qiao Tianya opened the bamboo curtain, Ding Tao and Li Xiong followed. Kong Ling stood up and asked, "This is?" "Master, Qiao Tianya wore a good knife, the cavalry raided." The gentleman inside the hall stood up. Yao Wenyu immediately looked at Shen Zichuan and said, "The reinforcements from the north have not arrived yet." Shen Zichuan lowered his arm and stared at the candlelight. After a while, he said, "Duanzhou did not get any news, either the battlefield fell or Luoshan fell. This room is full of scholars. Gao Zhongxiong, who has not experienced war, is even more pale. They are all looking at Shen Zichuan, and the monarch is the backbone of everyone." At this moment, Shen Zichuan could not show his fearful expression. He straightened his tea lid and stood up. Ding Tao shook open his jacket and put on Shen Zichuan, who blocked it with his hands over his back. The governor said, "Yangshan snow is coming. Where is the horse? Where is the horse?" Dead. The awakening garrison followed Yin Chang, the surrounding whistle was annihilated, and no one returned. Yin Chang filled the wine pouch, hung it back to his waist, and took a sip when he inserted the knife. Hassan on Dog Day. The station did not move, the whistle was dead, and the news could not go out, and the reinforcements could not come. "Reorganize the sentry post," Yin Chang said, "waiting for the opportunity to ignite Lanjiantai before dawn, so that you can get news from Beibei, Dunzhou and Bianjuan. Duanzhou has been slaughtered because the whistle can't run over the horses in Bianxia, so when Shen Zichuan established the Duanzhou Crossing Horse Road, he modeled the Wanli Beacon in Bian County. As long as these 3 lines are lit, the 3 parties know that critical." As soon as Yin Chang opened the curtain, he heard the drums of war screaming outside the city. The cavalry drummed. Yin Chang ran his legs and ran towards the wall. He opened his throat as he ran, and shouted with stubbornness, "Ready!" The archers between the stacks pulled their strings neatly, holding their breath and staring out of the city. A small barrel drum is fixed on both sides of the horses of the Bianxia cavalry. With the striking of the night, this is a precursor to the charge. When the drum sounds will be suspended, the horses snoring hot and rush forward. Yin Chang immediately waved his hand and continued to yell, "Arrow?" No one knows that the cavalry forward is divided into 2 wings at a time, revealing the shield infantry behind. The infantry moved quickly, approaching the gate against the arrow rain. Duanzhou faces the east, with an open terrain and close to the Chaosha River, where Shen Zichuan dug and built a moat and wanted to build a moat. But this year's time is tight. Only the channel of the main gate facing the east has taken shape, and has not yet drained from the Chaosha River. Shao Qia told Shen Zichuan before going south, so Shen Zichuan removed the square brick at the bottom of the ditch and replaced it with iron tribulus for the northern army. The gate opened, Yin Chang rushed out with the Duanzhou defense forces, and removed the pass board on the trench before the Bianxia cavalry charged. Without the board, the cavalry would not be able to cross the trench into the gate. As soon as the arrow rain on the wall stopped, the oil tanks of fire ignited. Yin Chang dragged the board back and continued to shout, "Smash the can." The fire oil tank on the wall stack smashed in unison, and the fire flames shone brightly. The garrison leaned forward and threw the fire oil tank down. The oil splashed on the infantry's shield and burst into flames. But Yin Chang wasn't happy, because he saw the infantry scattered and stepped out of the way to cover up the leader. This siege vehicle was originally used to cover trenches. It has a screen in front and a shed in the back. The head car in the middle can shield the arrows for the soldiers who dug the ground. In addition, it also has a prominent function, which is to extinguish fire. The infantryman hidden in the head of the car lifted out, and used a dagger to cut through the leather bag containing the river water, and it was able to contain the fire of the oil tank in an instant. Yin Chang recognized the purpose of the opponent. Hassan consumed the arrows and fire oil tanks of the defending army by the infantry and pushed the infantry to the trench. This was to prepare the cavalry in the rear. Archers prepare. As soon as Yin Chang's words fell, the infantry raised their shields again. I didn't know Yin Chang didn't plan to release an arrow at this moment. He pulled out his sword, rushed forward with the garrison, rushed to the trench, and jumped out like an old lion in the horrified eyes of the soldiers on the edge. "Stop it!" Yin Chang fell heavily on the brick wall of the ditch, and his feet suddenly slid down. He grabbed the edge of the ditch, and stepped up a few times, climbing up, and the defensive forces followed Yin Chang to kill the progressive army camp. Arrow! The arrow rain suddenly came, and the infantry who couldn't hold their shields finally fell. "Who is that?" The strong man on the pony leaned his head and saw Yin Chang's white hair across the crowd. He touched his machete with a four-legged snake above his bare arms and said with interest in Biantia, "Like a hero." "The strong Zhuoli doesn't recognize him," said the cavalry following the man. "He is the commander of the Izumi Defense Force, and the old general who captured Fanzhou for Shen Sichuan is called Yin Chang." Zhuo Jiaming wrote the words of the week and repeatedly said, one taste. Prosperity means. The cavalry soothed the restless horse. "He has the courage of a lion." Zhuoli continued to look at Yin Chang, clamped the horse's belly, and moved forward without hesitation in the shaking. "I'm going to fight him." The cavalry looked back at the rainbow eagle banner and advised, "Hassan's order has not come yet, and this is not the time for Zhuoli to strike." Zhuoli moved his sturdy arm, pulled out his machete, and said, "Hassan wants us to make a quick decision. I can't wait." The garrison assembles the people in the city. They will send the people to Shimen, where the connected horse road leads to Dunzhou. If the east gate fails, they will have a chance to escape before the massacre begins. The people came over one after another, dragging their homes with their mouths, looking hurriedly, and occasionally a few babies were crying, and they were soon covered up. More and more people gathered, and with the bombardment of the east gate, there were repressed gasps everywhere. "The gentlemen have been here for a long time. They are carrying simple bags, and they are all cases. This is their hard work." Gao Zhongxiong's white complexion did not recover. He tightened his baggage and stood with the crowd. Kong Ling pushed Yao Wenyu with a pocket on his chest and a restless tiger slave. Yao Wenyu's four-wheeler passed the people. Hearing that someone was sobbing in the crowd, he turned his head and looked at the other side. "First, sir," the widow who was alone holding the child covered her nose and mouth, whispered in a choked throat, "Are you going to slaughter again?" The young boy's eyes were gentle. He raised his hand, handed his papa to the other side, and said, "No." Weeping all around, his words didn't seem to be persuasive in the sound of the fight in front. If the city breaks and people can't run horses, they still have to die. They have to die. The man pulled the only donkey left, crouched at the corner, and said with a local accent, "I shouldn't go to Duanzhou to slap." Where did the garrison go? Someone approached the door and patted the door. "Now open the door and let us run to Dunzhou. How many can we escape before the city breaks?" The crowd was noisy, they shoved towards Shimen, and the restless atmosphere floated in the night. Gao Zhongxiong was forced to move forward, holding his baggage and squeezing sideways to Kong Ling, nothing to step on. Gao Zhongxiong guarded his baggage and raised his head. "You all have to." The crowd couldn't hear his voice at all. I don't know who had hit his elbow on Gao Zhongxiong's stomach. He didn't hold his baggage, watched his paper and pencils scattered on the ground, and hurriedly bent to pick it up. But there were too many people, and before he could find enough, the pen was broken. Gao Zhongxiong hurriedly said, "Mo step pen, mo step pen." Kong Ling was too crowded to stand and Yao Wenyu's four-wheeler was inconvenient. It would be bad if he rushed into the crowd. Kong Ling held the tiger slave in one hand and dragged the four-wheeler in one hand, and said to the surroundings, "Where is the guard? Come and protect Yuan Zhuo." Yao Wenyu's wheel got stuck on a hard object, and suddenly jumped with the impact, almost overturning. He turned his gaze and looked at the crowd. The moonlight was untimely quiet, sliding down the floor along his sleeve. The sound of tapping the door intensified, shouting "Open the door" everywhere. The memories of Duanzhou's slaughter are too deep. They can't see the dawn. The fiercer the fight in front is, the more bottomless everyone is. Hey! Gao Zhongxiong waved his sleeves angrily, and stopped writing. He explored his arm and grabbed the four-wheeler, and brought it in front of himself. "What's the rush? The city isn't broken yet, the monarch is ahead." Shouts suddenly sounded all around. "Where has the governor gone? Where did Shen Zichuan go? No soldiers and no guards have you left?" Where would Gao Zhongxiong know this would happen? He hurriedly said, "The prince is..." Shen Zichuan ran. Someone stomped, no one was seen. The atmosphere seemed to be ignited. The original depressed cry burst into the crowd. The impatience was rampant. The sound of the door slamming gradually turned into a slamming door. The panic filled with hysteric. The hidden danger named Shun Wei finally broke out. It was like a sharp sword hanging above Shen Zichuan's head at all times, hiding the Bow's resistance to Shen Zichuan. Even if Shen Zichuan obtained the 6 states of China and Bo, it could not be eradicated. Shen Wei deserted the city and fled. Duan and Dun, the corpses of the dead and blood. Now Shen Zichuan did not show up, and Shen fled again. "Open the door, open the door!" Someone cried. The gate protruded forward slightly and squeezed out the gap. The remaining garrison could not stop the crowd, and stretched its neck and reprimanded, "Don't squeeze!" But it didn't work, the crowd was messed up. The guard was panting, and did not dare to open the door. The eastern sentry was killed. If the cavalry had gone to the west, no one knew. He now opened the gate and stabbed Duanzhou from behind. It was a real city break. "It's up!" The garrison forces pushed the people by brute force, pulled out the sabers around their waists, and shouted, "Who the is it?" Kong Ling suddenly said, "Not good." Sure enough, as soon as the garrison fired his sword, the surrounding area erupted completely, and baggage and fists slammed into him like a shower, and the crowds rushed forward, shouting, "Open the door!" The garrison can't really kill someone. He guarded his head and noticed that someone was grabbing a knife in the back, and he couldn't help saying, "I'll hack someone to grab a knife." The gate was swayed and the garrison had not stood still. A huge force came from the back, and then the entire gate made a bang, and was hit by a collision from outside. My day! The garrison lay on the ground, was stomped a few feet, climbed up and held the people blocking the road, pushed people frantically, and shouted at their soldiers, "Hurry up the door! Cavalry!" The crowd exclaimed, and everyone rushed back and forth. The cavalry broke the city. The garrison dragged its knife, leaned against its back against the crumbling door, drank neatly with dozens of soldiers, and tried to push the broken gate back. However, the giant wood collision outside slammed the city gate again, shaking their backs to numbness. Yao Wenyu supported his hand, and Gao Zhongxiong and Kong Ling set aside each other, trying to push Yuan Zhuo away. Kong Ling's scalp exploded. He heard the long-lost horseshoe sound across the half-capped city gate. "I took Yuan Zhuo out of the alley." Kong Ling pushed Yao Wenyu, hesitating about the case, and raised his robe. "Go ahead." Gao Zhongxiong shook his hand fiercely. He said, "I'm staying with Mr. The gate was completely smashed, and the wood splashed. The garrison could not carry it, and the cavalry jumped directly over their heads, ran in, and the machete waved at Gao Zhongxiong. The garrison wolves rushed up, suddenly held the machete, carrying them and said, "Run fast, report to the government prince quickly, Shimen is broken, we keep dash." The words of the garrison fell, and the head fell to the ground. Gao Zhongxiong yelled. His feet were soft, and he supported the four-wheeler and almost fell to the ground. Yao Wenyu watched the machete strike again, and his back was soaked, and he suddenly passed the car body and blocked in front of Kong Ling and Gao Zhongxiong. A light right across the crowd, it seemed like a stream of mercury in the night, and the long hum of the long sword flew into the cavalry's throat, and he rushed forward when the opponent fell down. Xiao Tianya pulls his horse, pulls out his sword, inserts the scabbard, gasps at Yao Wenyu, and yells at Ding Tao behind him, "Take the gentleman!" Yao Wenyu didn't move. He clenched his handles and turned his head to look over Xiao Tianya. When he turned around, he saw Feng Ta Shuangyi hissing his hoof, and Shen Zichuan's white sleeves on his back rolled up. Yangshan's snow was like an angry dragon. When it passed the cavalry's throat, it was sharp and clear. The wind-stepping frost coat crossed the head and ran across the gate of the city. The genie behind him swept across the side sand cavalry and splattered in the squall wind. Xiao Tianya is also leaving, but Yao Wenyu looks at him, and there are faint blue tendons floating on the back of his hand, and he whispers to him, "Bring the prince." Shen Zichuan hugged his body and broke his right hand as early as in Dunzhou. He is now the master of 6 states, and accidentally died on the battlefield, and all the efforts of China Bo will be lost. Xiao Tianyao was expressionless. Yao Wenyu looked at Xiao Tianya beggingly, saying word by word, "The Prince of Wanqing is not at risk." Shen Zichuan shook off the blood beads on the snow blade of Yangshan Mountain, pulled his horse in the open space. His chest was undulating, facing the wind, his right fingers faintly twitched. He stood in front, looking at the gray world. He is not strong, but he will not fall. In the sky, he looks like misty gravel and a sharp steel knife nailed in front of Duanzhou City. He is insidious and deceitful, and he will report without any means. He was not expected to be emperor at all. But Xiao Tianya leaned over and stunned Yao Wenyu's forehead. When Yao Wenyu thought he would do the same, he turned the horse's head and drank. Oath to death, follow the palace king to kill the enemy. The sky was broken in a hurry, and there was a dim light in the dark. The blade of Shen Zichuan wiped the outside of the thigh, and the sharp blade shot out in the light. Like the owner, the wind-stepping frosty clothing only moved forward. Forward! Jin Ichi shouted in unison. Follow him to kill the enemy! In these people's eyes, he is the monarch who opened the world. The Biancha cavalry who came to assault Shimen did not expect that such a light horse was hidden in Duanzhou City. They rode on the same pony and moved forward and backward in the dark world. The Biancha cavalry who came to assault Shimen did not expect that such a light horse was hidden in Duanzhou City. They rode on the same pony and moved forward and backward in the dark world. Shen Zichuan is a white bird among the crows. His clean blade cut through the dawn and said before the second round of charge, "Backward." Ding Tao guided the people to evacuate, and the gate of Shimen had been broken, and it would soon be reduced to a battlefield. Li Xiong erected Gao Zhongxiong and followed Kong Ling and Yao Wenyu behind the people. Genie rides neatly in front of the door. They are few in number, but they are currently the absolute elite of Zhongbua. The surviving garrison of Simon did not dare to neglect, and pushed the car gable as a substitute at the foot of the city. This kind of movable wall filled with lime mortar is not as thick as the city gate, and a strong bow can be placed in the recessed place. The rainbow eagle flag hunted, and the cavalry of the Biancha had already beaten. The small barrel drum was deafening, and the pony plowed its hooves. They did not give Simon a chance to repair it, and they launched a second round of charge ahead of Jin Ichi in the sound of the drum. The sound of horseshoes was like a shower, the ground moved slightly, the gravel bounced, and the dust suddenly hit his face. Beneath the cavalry of the Biancha cavalry, it was as fast as a hungry panther. Xiao Tianya's horse is just behind the side of Feng Shuangyi. He tightened the reins and said, "Ready." Genie rides like a set, the wind blows over their cheeks, but no sound is taken away, they seem to even breathe away. The headed cavalry crossed the distance, and approached Shen Zichuan while galloping. Shen Zichuan smelled the heavy sweat of the cavalry, and even saw the cavalry look on the cavalry. Time seems to stand still. The next moment, Shen Zichuan drew out his sword and said, "Kill the enemy! Kill the enemy!" Jinichi was like a storm of dark clouds, and the Biancha cavalry hit the gate of the city gate fiercely. The steel knife and the scimitar staggered. Shimen had no tactics at all. The only way was to kill the enemy. Only when the spirit of the cavalry was defeated head-on, the guarding of Duanzhou could continue. Shen Zichuan must rush to the forefront and unite the hearts of Duanzhou people in such a rude manner. The cavalry blocked the passage and blocked the light, and the two sides crowded here to kill the sky. The blood splashed around Shen Zichuan's sleeves. He waved the knife and turned over the enemy army in front of him, and the morning light leaked on his cheek, bleeding with sweat. The prince's eyes were dark, with an overwhelming momentum to shave the cavalry and rush forward. This side Sand cavalry was a sneak attack team behind, and lost to the high morale Genie riding, backed up in the passage. They suffered in both confrontations and eventually had to withdraw from the channel. The defensive forces acted when they saw the opportunity. They pushed the car gable together and blocked the broken city gate when Shen Zichuan retreated. The cymbal made a click sound and the defensive forces pushing the wall shouted, "Not enough bows!" Shen Zichuan pulled his horse, Yang Shanxue drew to the side, and shed blood all the way. "Put down the spare hanging door," he said. The defending army at the city's head dragged the rope, and the hanging door slammed to the ground under the rolling sound of gears, blocking the inside of the passage. This is the second-tier defense wall in Duanzhou, which is used to deal with this situation. Shen Zichuan's right hand could not hold the knife tightly, as long as he stopped, his would ache. He touched his sleeve pocket and found only Xiao Qie's blue papa. He wrapped the handle of Yang Shanxue with the palm of his hand with a blue patch, and pinched his fingers to ensure that the knife would not come off. "Now past the north-south city gates," Shen Zichuan said. "Put down all the spare hanging gates." Amur had a military map of China Bo 7 years ago, and he has a lot of knowledge about Duan and Dun. From the tactics of Hassan's rapid raid and precise hitting, he must have seen the military map of China Bo. Since Duanzhou has become a lonely city, and it would be unwise to just keep the east gate. Put down the spare hanging door and you can't go out anymore. Qiao Tianya watched the Chen Mang crossing the wall. Wolf Yentai has not been lit yet. Some people have to go to the Wolf Yentai in Dun and Luo. Shen Zichuan clenched his palms. The east gate is still open. As long as you light up the Wolf Yentai near Bian County, the reinforcements of Bian County will arrive. Hassan must have arrested Xiao Qie by some means, but Xiao Qie will definitely come, so Hassan will choose to attack. He wants to make a quick decision, rushing to Xiao Qie to lead the reinforcements before breaking Duanzhou. He ran out of the granary and ran again. He didn't want to confront Xiao Qie directly at China Bo. Yin Chang led the garrison to retreat to kill a group of infantry. As long as he blocked the infantry from erecting a pass, the east gate would not be immediately charged by the cavalry. "Retreat, retreat. Don't be desperate, we have to fight protracted battles with these bitches." Yin Chang wiped the blood on his face and kicked the slow-moving garrison ass. The 4 gates of Duanzhou must be guarded, which is a difficult problem for the 20,000 defensive forces. Yin Chang is going to drag his time. His garrison must be able to withstand the cavalry charge, and before the cavalry charge, he must be able to resist the infantry and save energy. The garrison pulled back into the city. Yin Chang was the last group. He heard the sound of horseshoes behind him when he was going to cross the trench. The old man rolled on the spot with his field-proven insight and shouted, "Draw a knife!" That crescent-like machete hooked straight over the position where Yin Chang's neck was just now. The old man touched his neck with anxiety and shouted at the comber, "You won't say hi." Zhuo couldn't understand Yin Chang's words. His powerful horseshoe had stepped in front of Yin Chang, and Yin Chang rolled over and rolled the dust all over. Zhuo said happily, "Delicate prey." Yin Chang couldn't understand Zhuo's words either. He supported the ground with one hand, holding the knife in the back of the other hand, and confronted Zhuo strangely at the edge of the trench. Ferocious, Yin Chang wiped his red nose with his earthy thumb and defined Zhuo. His eyes were as quiet as the sky, and the noisy shells couldn't shake him. His title to the earth is very different from the noise of appearance, and he always has unparalleled calmness in times of crisis. Yin Chang's deep voice was dumb, and the old man said with certainty, "I went to Zizhou 7 years ago." Zhuo understood the word Zizhou, and he gave a machete to Yin Chang and said in a lame Dazhou dialect, "I've been here, take this knife." Yin Chang's gray hair was disrupted by the blast, and the old man kicked off with both feet, then leaped out, then leaped and drew his sword to Zhuo's head. Zhuo was blocked by a knife, and the warhorse under his seat was pushed back a few steps by Yin Chang's strength. Zhuo said keenly, "You know me?" Yin Chang shook his palms when he landed. He slipped away and laughed suddenly. "I know you, you don't recognize me. 7 years ago in Zizhou, I watched you burn houses and slaughter all over the city." He looked suddenly cold. "You took their heads away." Zhuo half-heard and guessed. After waiting for Yin Chang to finish speaking, he untied the twine on the side of the leg, where the head of the chashi whistle hung. He picked it up and threw it to Yin Chang, saying in Bianxia, "I don't want it any more, I want your head." His head rolled at Yin Chang's feet, all with young faces. Yin Chang looked at these faces, and then looked at Zhuo. He stared quietly at Zhuo. Zhuo felt that the beast in the old body was roaring. "You should give dignity to those who died," Yin Chang said. "You beasts!" Fei Xing followed the garrison to disperse the people. He hesitated on the street for a moment, then turned around and ran back to the east gate. He heard the sound of horseshoes in the middle. Fei Xing turned back and saw Shen Zichuan was riding to the east gate with a genie. "Get on!" Qiao Tianya threw the whip hanging on the side to Fei Xing. Fei Xing caught the whip, slowed down, and turned over when the empty horse ran past him. He grabbed the reins and asked Qiao Tianya, "How is Simon?" "Broken." Fei Xing's face changed. Qiao Tianya went on to say, "The prince blocked it again." Fei Xing could not help cursing, "Can you finish the fuck?" Qiao Tianya laughed. 2 people followed Shen Zichuan and continued to gallop eastward, staying in front of the city gate, watching the city gate wide open, and the garrison had not yet withdrawn. Shen Zichuan dismounts, strides the meteor to the city head, walks to the middle of the center, and is slammed to a halt by intensive shelling. He pulled away the floating dust and said, "Is there a female wall?" "Not much," Fei Xing said, covering his ears. "The cavalry has been replaced with a single-shot cannon." Shen Zichuan's heart sank slightly, and Hassan was going to blast the east defense wall in Duanzhou with continuous shelling. He looked down the wall and saw that the cavalry had been forced not far from the trench. "Open the gate and let the water go," said Shen Zichuan, "and the cavalry is about to charge." Opening the gate, Fei Xing ran to the south, shouting that he was half caught in the dust. He covered his mouth and nose, and immediately remembered something. He grabbed the garrison on the side and asked, "Why don't you close the gate? The cavalry is about to charge." The garrison responded with a cough. The commander has not yet withdrawn." Fei Xing was startled. He could not care about the heavy stones flying around, grabbed the wall and looked down. There are too many mixed soldiers and horses underneath, and he found Yin Chang with great effort. Back to the city. Yin Chang's knife caught Zhuo's machete, the 2 sides saw on the flat ground, and the old man slid under his feet. He drank backwards, and saw the cavalry that ran over with his light. "Can't fight long." Yin Chang immediately relaxed, and the knife fell along the gap of the machete. He stretched out his arms and copied the handle, and ran his legs toward the trench. The water storage sluices on both sides of the city wall have not been opened, waiting for the garrison to return to the city before releasing. However, Yin Chang felt hot behind his back when he was running wildly, and he shouted, "Close the door!" The cavalrymen running behind didn't come to charge at all, they took out with their tails in their pockets before the gates were closed. The birds were panicking in panic, and their pockets were burning, followed by swarming across the trench and crashing into the gate. The hanging door in the gate of the city gate is wooden. Once it ignites, the defense of the east gate is gone. Yin Chang stopped in front of the ditch and jumped suddenly, but Zhuoli behind him flew, hooking Yin Chang's robe, and dragged Yin Chang to the ground in the sound of stabbing. Yin Chang stuck in the ground with a knife, stabilized the body pulled by the horse, and hissed toward the gate, exhausted. "Close the door, let the water go!" "Fuck, fuck!" Fei Xing leaped to the next step, pushing the crowd towards the passage. "Wait a minute, I am the ancestor." The fire sparrow hit the city gate, and the clothing of the garrison had already burned. The crowd rolled over to extinguish the fire and ran towards the inside of the passage. There are spare water bags for fire fighting at the foot of the inner city, but there are too many fire sparrows. If you do not close the door, the hanging door will be closed. Shen Zichuan was in the shelling and his throat was dry. He was stabbed in the dust by the sunrise from the east and said, "Close the door." The city gate moved silently, and Fei Xing was still crowded in the crowd behind him. Like a duckweed against the current, he couldn't catch the life-saving straw he could support. The light in the passage began to converge, and the garrison that crowded in blocked Fei Xing's eyes. He couldn't see outside, let alone the opposite side of the trench. "Don't close the door." Fei Xing pushed the defense out of desperation, using the fastest speed in his life, and said, "Don't close the door." The gate was slammed tightly, and the passageway was completely darkened. The sluice gates on both sides suddenly rose, and the trenches that had not been repaired barely filled the water, drawing a line in front of the gate and the cavalry. Shen Zichuan suddenly raised his voice. "Fire!" Yin Chang couldn't bear it and was dragged backwards by the war horse. He dragged his knife, drew it to the ground, and tore off the wine pouch on the waist in the sound of horseshoes. After biting it, his face filled with water. Yin Chang tossed away the wine pouch, wiped his face, and smiled to the sky. "Go ahead." Fei Xing knelt down in front of the city gate. He cut his hands between the gaps, gritted his teeth and said, "Open the door." Shen Zichuan's lip line was tight. He looked at Yin Chang, his eyes flushed. Fei Xing caught blood in his hands in the gap covered by the iron sheet. He smashed the door, hit it, and said, "Open the door, open it for me." Zhuoli covered Yin Chang's neck with a whip, and pulled the old man with his arm. Yin Chang was still holding the knife. He was stuck on the ground and looked at Zhuoli. He said, give it a pleasure." Zhuoli's scimitar rested on Yin Chang's neck. When he hooked forward, Yin Chang flew forward. The old man gave up his arm with Zhuoli's arms, and gave up cutting the whip between his neck. The steel knife he copied was sharp, almost twisting his body, leaning on the forearm with the blade in the roar. Zhuoli scratched Zhuoli's head before hooking off his head. Yin Chang fell to the ground with a tightly tied whip in front of his neck. He breathed heavily from his nose, supported the ground with his elbow, and climbed a little in the direction of Duanzhou. The tide-like iron hoof was behind him. "Anonymous." Yin Chang laughed and cried again. "Shaoxing." Yin Chang gasped and shouted to the city gate, his voice uttering through the sky. "Fu Jun, I think this day is a great victory." The old man was buried in a horseshoe. Fei Xing was across the city gate, and after a brief silence, he grabbed the iron sheet and slid down the tiny light, propping up the gate. The author has something to say. I made the gable car gable, and it may indeed have the role of a defensive device, but I did not see the exact name when I made the data. The chaffing firebirds were blocked outside the door. The garrison did not stop. They ran in the passage, dragging a spare water bag, and splashed water on the gate in case. The chaffing firebirds were blocked outside the door. The garrison did not stop. They ran in the passage, dragging a spare water bag, and splashed water on the gate in case. The edge sand cavalry across the trench was smashed against Joly's body. Joly was a four-legged snake that followed Amur to go to Zhongba 7 years ago, or was a gift from Amur to Hassan. In a few days the ties with Duanzhou were cut off. Take him away. The cavalry looked at the gate of Duanzhou city. This reckless and stupid waste. Get up! We must find a way to cross this ditch before Hassan arrives. Yin Chong withdrew the pass board and killed the infantry of the pusher, allowing the Biancha cavalry to face the trenches for a brief period of anxiety, leaving the guards in the city a chance to breathe. However, the ditch in Duanzhou is not yet a moat. The square bricks at both ends are not embedded in order to connect with the ditch on the north and south side. This ditch cannot be filled for a long time. The water storage sluices were all open, the water had been emptied, and even if the trenches could persist, the edge sand cavalry would find a way to the trenches shortly after. Before dark, the east gate will surely usher in the onslaught of the edge cavalry. Preparing for the heavy stone, Xin Zichuan bowed his head and said to Qiao Tianyao, "Push the crossbow to the wall." The garrison troops below the city pushed the bed crossbow together, and moved upwards along the wide passage. The cavalry's single-tip artillery continued to attack, and heavy stones flew against the city wall. The eastern city wall had been thrown out of the gap. The broken masonry was mixed with mud blocks, and the wall stack collapsed a few. The garrison had to hold his head to dodge, using his body against the falling crossbow. The garrison was unable to carry the gravity, and a group of people were pressed by the bed crossbow with their heels on the ground, and they also descended, only shouting, "It's too heavy!" Qiao Tianya jumped over the steps to get a handle, but watched a commoner sank slightly and raised his arms to support the bed where the crossbow slid. Ji Gang's white hair was stained with gray, and Xin Xing yelled, "From!" The garrison only felt that his back was light, and Ji Gang's forehead and blue tendon jumped slightly. He took a step and let the bed crossbow slowly move up the slope. When the bed crossbow was in place, Ji Gang's arms were shaking and his back was soaked with sweat. At this moment, when the sun was shining, the sweat was mixed with the dust and covered the face, and there were running soldiers everywhere. The bows and arrows on the wall stacks are not daring to shoot. The enemy forces will likely induce consumption, they will stay until the cavalry charge. The bed crossbow is the same. This killer can't be moved easily. It must be fatal in one hit. Just like Yin Chong killed Zhuoli, it must hurt the cavalry. The garrison is divided, the 3 teams are guarded by the 3 gates, and the genie rides on the east gate to stand by, said Xin Zichuan, raising his hand holding the knife and wiping the sweat from his cheek with his back. The other 3 gates must be blocked before dark. The Duanzhou granary is full. To fight Duanzhou, the cavalry can consume the Duanzhou granary for a long time, leaving Duanzhou trapped for months and consuming it. However, Hassan wanted to fight fast, so he would not take a long time siege. The cavalry has been onslaught from last night to now. If the east gate stalemates, the cavalry is likely to go around the other 3 gates and make side attacks like they attacked Shimen. Xin Zichuan lowered the hanging door for defense in the other 3 doors, but this was not a long-term solution, because the cavalry had siege equipment, and a collision with heavy wood could directly break the city gate, and then broke the hanging door, allowing the cavalry to enter smoothly. City. Fire oil stones, Xin Zichuan said, then demolish the watchtower in the city, and let the garrison soldiers who guarded the 3 gates bring the things that can be used to defend against the wall. Whenever they see the cavalry, they blow their horns. Prompt, throwing away debris to stop them from charging. You have to find a way out of town as soon as possible. Xin Zichuan looked to the horizon to the southeast, where Wolf Yentai was silent. The gentlemen were gathered on the horse farm. The location was empty enough to accommodate several people in the city. Gao Zhongxiong was relieved at this moment, leaned over and rubbed his calf, and said to Kong Ling, "The situation is just right situation." As soon as he was anxious, he stuttered again. Kong Ling appeased. No matter, Shunwei had to take Yuanzhou back then, it was already courageous. I was in Dunzhou in the early years and learned that the cavalry entered the city, it was really nothing to care about. Yao Wenyu clasped his sleeves and was interrupted by only one hand in silence. He looked over and saw the proper woman asking the child to pay back the child. Yao Wenyu raised his hand, but did not pick up the parcel. His dusty fingers slightly stretched out and touched the child's cheek gently. Live. Yao Wenyu's chest fluctuated slightly. The footsteps on the racecourse were dense, and the garrison rushed across the wall to get on the wall. Bows and arrows supply Simon. The teenager, headed back, inserted the knife, carrying the debris with his bare hands. "Leave us for the collapsed watchtower." "Not enough," the soldier at the wall replied. "It just collapsed, not enough. Duanzhou has a lot of defensive equipment. The armament has been evacuated, mainly to support the east gate. The remaining 3 gates can only pick up the remaining points." Bows and arrows were consumed by a wave of infantry soldiers in the morning, and they had to replenish the west gate blocked by the gable. "What can I do?" Suddenly a man stood on the racecourse. He looked at the old and asked, "Can this be thrown?" The teenager said, "If you throw it, you won't pay it back. Then you take it away." The man tried his best to speak Mandarin. He said, "The city is surrounded, and the cavalry is not killed. It is useless to keep the hoe. Are you short of people?" The garrison did not answer, and they just clashed with the people at Simon. Several individuals stood on the racetrack, all of them are young people, with their own farming tools, and rushed to the defensive army and shouted, "If there is no shortage? If there is no shortage, we are all human." The cavalry's bombardment progressed till the skies reached dusk. The eastern city wall was replenished, and the spare female wall was smashed. The cavalry had not stopped. This was a real bombardment. Single-shot cannons are all stones. Xiao Tianya crouched behind the wall pile, facing the sound of guns, and said to Shun Zichuan, "They are in the wild, they do ent lack stones, and they fight like this for 2 more days. Unbearable. Hassan can't wait for 2 days." Shen Zichuan's cheeks were dirty. "The cavalry must be charging before night. The garrison has lost Yinchang. The cavalry wants to explore the current depth of the garrison. The garrison has been exhausted after a day of shelling. This is a good opportunity for the cavalry at this moment." "They crossed the trench and we opened the gate," said Shen Zichuan. The garrison continued to guard the city and let Genie ride against the charge. "Ian Feixing. You and me," Shen Zichuan raised his eyes. "You alternate with me, as long as you repel the charge of the cavalry, you will immediately return to the city, don't fall in love. The number of cavalry is far more than that of Genie. Steel needles cannot face the axe. As long as Shun Zichuan breaks their impetus, he can maintain his stance." Xiao Tianya licked his lips and said, "You are the monarch, not the general." Shun Zichuan didn't answer. He stood up against the wall, crossed the black cavalry under the dim sky, and looked at Chashi. Chashi is like a jade belt immersed in the sunset, reflecting the magnificent thick clouds, and the hunting soars in it. Shun Zichuan's eyes gradually gathered his edge. He said, "I am the governor of Zhongbua." The rose-colored clouds above the Chasha River had not yet spread, and the wall at Shun Zichuan's hand was shocked. The trebuchet. The garrison at the watchtower sounded aloud. "The cavalry's trebuchet is here." The trebuchet, which kicked off last night, rested for a whole day after the single-shot cannon, and played again. The cavalry began to split the team. They drummed drums and quickly passed information on the battlefield. Shen Zichuan immediately ripped off the tedious robe, tightened the single-arm restraint, and walked down the steps to the bottom of the city. Fengta Shuangyi waited in awe, and he turned over and said to Xiao Tianya, "Be alert to the other 3 doors. Xiao Tianya saluted, saying aloud, "Prince, big victory." Shen Zichuan turned his head and faced the passage. His beautiful face was covered with blood and sweat, and only those eyes remained bright. The genie riders behind were breathing smoothly, and they had to make quick decisions. The warhorse on the side suddenly sinked. Fei Xing got on the horse, dragged the embroidered spring sword in front of his waist, and his red eyes looked at Shen Zichuan. "I am the guard of the prince." He paused for a moment, raised his sword. "We are the prince's shield." Shen Zichuan nodded slightly, and Feng Ta Shuangyi began to move forward. His figure gradually entered the passage, and in the silence facing the city gate, Shen Zichuan said, "I will live and die with you." The gate opened again, and the dull noise ushered in the last daylight, shuttled between countless horseshoes. The rainbow eagle flag was suddenly raised in the afterglow. The cavalry erected a flagpole and swooped down after the infantry after the rectification, and shouted in a flank, "Front dash!" Fei Xing's scattered hair was blown by the wind, his shaved fingers clenched the handle, and when Shen Zichuan drove his horse forward, he shouted, "Great victory!" The wind stepped on the frost and stepped on the dust. The infantry gave up the shield, knelt neatly with the pass-board, and set up a narrow bridge when the cavalry was about to pass over itself. The scimitars stepped over the ditch and collided with Jin Ichi under the city. The Biancha cavalry, who had rested all day outside the city, was full of energy. They drank enough milk tea and were full of jerky. They thought that they were facing the exhausted garrison, who knew that Jiniki also rested properly and leaned on dry food after being full. There is no time to take advantage of it. The two sides were like the blades hitting the blades, brutally colliding in the chaotic horseshoe. Yang Shanshuan never slammed into the machete, and Shen Zichuan straightened his throat straight. The arm restraint became heavy, and the dripping blood slid down the arm, staining Shen Zichuan's half-body red. The number of cavalry charge was not enough for the first time, and the hurried bridge was too narrow. They could not stand the killing of genie riding, and could only back off temporarily. Shen Zichuan immediately dropped off his horse and returned to the city. When he entered the passage, the gate was closed again. A torch was lit in the passage, and it was almost half an hour. Shen Zichuan's right arm was dull. He didn't have such a long time in Jinyui's strength. After he got to Zhongbua, he was aware of his body's insensitivity at the moment because of poor physical practice. 2 fingers are unconscious. Shen Zichuan raised his left hand, wiped the blood on his face with no expression, and changed position with Xiao Tianya. Jin Wei rested for less than an hour, and the drum outside rang again, and the cavalry charged twice. This time, Xiao Tianya led his troops to fight back, and did not return until he was ugly. Wheel battle. Fei Xing watched the cavalry's moving torches on the wall stack. The cavalry they charge each round is different, so they won't stop until dawn. Hassan hid a part of his troops. Shen Zichuan rested against the wall and stuffed a few hoes. Otherwise Suan wouldn't be left without news. Shao Chia went south and did a deduction with Lu Guangbai. The purpose of his south trip was to lure Hassan into the army, but this precursor was that the edge sand cavalry at the gate of the battlefield would be reduced. Lu Guangbai's delay in coming to support shows that the onslaught in the warring place has not stopped. Hassan has long disguised himself for the attack on Duanzhou. It is likely that there are more than 6 behind Amur. Fei Xing looked at the cavalry and said, "I have to bring the old man back." Shen Zichuan barely finished eating the buns, and stood up with Yang Shanshua. He had not slept all day and all night. "This is to find a way." Shen Zichuan looked up slightly. "The next round of charge, Xiao Tianya does not have to retreat, we will leave the city together." Fei Xing turned his head. Shen Zichuan's eyes were gloomy, and he said clearly, "Fuck." Fei Xing's stiff facial muscles gradually moved, and he didn't know why. He suddenly laughed, smiled, raised his hands to wipe his tears, and said, "Fuck." When it was ugly, the dark clouds covered the moon. When it was ugly, the dark clouds covered the moon. After the reorganization, the cavalry withdrew the front team and replaced it with the elite of the first charge. The torches they raised suddenly went out, and the drums that had been ringing all night stopped, and suddenly the Duanzhou city fell into a dim light. Without torch lighting, the archer at the wall could not see the opposite side of the trench. The sentry climbed to the last watchtower, bravely stepped on the railing, and surveyed its neck from a high altitude. "I can't see clearly," the sweat dripping from the whistle, and he gestured to the wall. "It's too dark." The onslaught of single-shot cannons and trebuchets also stopped, and apart from the scattered sound of horseshoes, there was no news in the city. The garrison relaxed in this rare silence, as if they were afraid of being alarmed, and they stood up in their respective positions, feeling a little foretaste of the coming storm. The garrison in the passage began to withdraw, and they dragged the cleaned-up corpses to make way for Jinichi. The clear water was splashed on the bluestone slab, poured over the horseshoe, and washed off the strong smell. The cavalry's cross moved, and they had to pass a stable pass to form a wall in front of the gate. They figured out the way of genie riding in many trials. For steel needles, they must build thick bricks and pad it. The garrison on the wall did not dare to wipe their sweat. They rolled their knots and listened to the sound of horseshoes, counting down in unison in their hearts. The cavalry ran towards the trench. The cavalry's horseshoes stepped on the access board, and the sound of thunder rang through the trench. "It's now." The garrison waved the flag and shouted mutely, "Push!" The heavy stone at the wall tumbled along the small wooden passageway, grumbling around a short place, leaping out from the edge, hitting the trench like raindrops. Hidden in the dim cavalry, they couldn't stop the assault from above. They were smashed by heavy stones and turned over. The traffic board was broken most of the time. Countless cavalry fell into the trench. The city gate is already wide open, with Shunzichuan as the center, Qiao Tianyao and Fei Xing as the two wings, and the three teams are in a row. The cavalry's scattered formations had numerous gaps. Genie riding saw the seams and attacked, starting from the ditch, tearing the cavalry's charge team to pieces. The rock pusher on the wall was replaced by an archer. The hot oil poured on the arrow, wrapped in flakes, and shot down while igniting. The cavalry did not have the infantry's lead car cover, nor the armor body. The rocket could burn when it rubbed through the clothing, and the whole trench suddenly lit up. Fei Xing's right wing has stepped across the trench to the opposite side of the trench. He was half-length in the blast, whipped forward with a whip, and slid forward when passing Yin Chang's position, pulling out with one arm. Old man's knife. As soon as he grasped Yin Chang's handle, he tilted his head and rubbed his cheek on his shoulder and arm, and flipped the knife into the scabbard vacated on his back. Fei Xing leaned his head in the wind, and continued to gallop towards Lanjiantai in the southeast direction. The cavalry realized that a light horse was breaking through in the dark. The cavalry they mobilized had not blocked the gap, and was dragged by Shun Zichuan, who also crossed the trench. Jinichi's center and left wing came to cover, facing away from the burning trench, struggling to fight in the arrow rain. The scattered cavalry quickly reorganized, but the speed of the genie horse was also very fast. Everyone had no advantage over each other on the horse, which was faster than Hu's sword. Qiao Tianyao was splashed with blood so that he could hardly see his original appearance. He wiped the knife with his sleeve, whistled, and followed Shun Zichuan. "Fun," Qiao Tianyao wiped the knife. "Is this knife good enough?" "As fast as Yang Shanxue," Shun Zichuan said in the dark night on Mars. Qiao Tianya's rotten sleeve revealed his arms, and he didn't even wear his arm restraints, like a sheathless knife. He suddenly leaned over, not knowing the truth, and said, "Don't talk to Yuan Zhua, the misunderstanding is big, I'm not happy." "Then I really are." Shun Zichuan's backhandled Yang Shanxue slammed up, blocking Qiao Tianya from behind the machete, pouring Qiao Tianya's blood on the blade's swiping sound, calmly saying, "Tidy Yuan Zhua is happy." The genie riding behind returned to his position, and Shun Zichuan stopped talking. He dragged Yang Shanxue, dropped the horse's head, turned his horseshoe in the direction of the cavalry's single-ended cannon, and ran. The man of the military sent by the cavalry galloped in the team, waving a flag, pointing at a single-shot cannon, saying, "Withdraw the gun!" But Genie was riding too fast, and the scorpion guarding the side of the single-ended cannon slammed the hammer against Shen Zichuan. Shen Zichuan was holding back to Yang Shanxue, and when he was about to confront the scorpion, he suddenly rolled off the horse, and Feng Ta Shuangyi immediately lifted his feet away. The scorpion's intention of breaking the wind and stepping on the knees of the frosty coat failed, and he swore in a whisper when he turned his body. Cunning, Shen Zichuan stomped on the ground, and the scorpion was tall and powerful. Shen Zichuan climbed his shoulders, and crooked the scorpion's head with one hand, so that his neck was exposed. Yang Shanxue was holding the cut of flesh and cutting past. The right hand was weak, and this time he missed, without cutting the scorpion's throat. The scorpion's neck spurted blood, and the sledged hammer didn't stop. He issued a rough pant unlike humans and pulled Shen Zichuan back with his free hand. The blood on Shen Zichuan's brow bone was dripping down. He resisted gravity, and the blade that had been scratched was swept back again, just like slaughtering cattle and sheep, and thoroughly slashing each other's throat with the force of a saw. This endless numbness caused the genie riding behind to scalp. The scorpion fell to the ground, and both the hammer and Shen Zichuan fell out. Feng Ta Shuangyi had already come back, and Shen Zichuan got up and started again. Qiao Tianya lifted the hammer with his toe, held it in his hand, and swung it down vigorously according to one leg of the single-shot cannon. The foot immediately cracked and broke, and the entire single-shot cannon tilted to this side. The sound of a wood burst exploded in my ears, and the fire ignited immediately. Fei Xing was holding the torch, and his right wing had approached Lanjiantai. He breathed a sigh of breath, and when he got off the horse, he took a moment to chop the edge of the step with his other arm, and ran towards the stage with his hands and feet. The chasing cavalry rushed to drink and came, and Genie rode on the stage to kill them again. Fei Xing sprinted down the steps and threw the torch into the incineration table. The dry Taiwan nest burned up. He stepped back and said, "It's..." The garrison on the city wall burst into tears and shouted, "Here it is!" Feng Ta Shuangyi retreated, and Shen Zichuan said, "Withdraw." The fire in Lanjiantai was soaring, and after a while, the eastward Lanjiantai would burn in turn. Fei Xing covered his heart and wanted to wipe his eyes. Who knew that the gust of wind was blowing soot, and the sky began to burst after a half-night. A few drops of rain was a precursor, and the rainstorm in Duanzhou City was like a cold rain. Splashed down on Fei Xing's face. "It's raining." The fire in Lanjiantai was like a swaying tender flower in the heavy rain. It was unable to lift its head with water drops, and the fire gradually became smaller. Fei Xing rushed to the stage, blocking the rain with his hands, and said furiously, "God! A few days of clear sky in Duanzhou is bound to usher in a torrential rain. The rain is pouring down. The ditch and Dongmen will not be short of water for the time being, but Lanjiantai will no longer be able to ignite. Here, hey! Your ancestor!" Fei Xing rubbed his flintstone, but the sudden rain was so wet that he wet his hands. "Ignite it." The rain was a shower. It came fiercely, but it stopped fast. As long as you returned to the city temporarily, you still had a chance. Shen Zichuan swung his heart and waved his knife toward the southeast, saying, "Retreat." Fei Xing's eyes were blurry. He thought it was washed by the heavy rain. He rubbed the flintstone madly to see that Mars was extinguished. "Old man." Fei Xing's nails were stained with blood when he scratched the door, and he shook his hand, so he went to pick up the hay in the nest. "It's too difficult to be a hero." Fei Xing opened his eyes red, pulled out the notebook for listening, and stuffed it into the nest. He leaned over, blowing in his mouth, and was choked by the smoke. "I'm in this life." Fei Xing was blowing a small fire, letting the tongue of the fire lick the listening notebook. The fire stunned, almost burning Fei Xing's hair. He fell to the ground and spit. Self-denial just once. The two-flame wolf Yentai was not high in the heavy rain, but it was enough. The first ignition star in the southeast was slightly bright. Then, countless fire lights lit up in turn, spreading out along the wolf Yentai, and pulled into a meandering, long dragon, extinguished in the heavy rain. Fei Xing came to the stage a few steps and was about to jump down. The voice he was about to shout was stuck in his throat and backed away. The cavalry in front of Lanjiantai was so overwhelming that there was no space to find. Jin Yiwei's right wing is as thin as my Mang in front of such a large force. Fei Xing was soaked. He looked at the embroidered spring knife he had cut out of the gap and said to you, "I told you long ago that being a hero didn't end well." The rain slapped Fei Xing, and the noisy voice seemed to be arguing with him. The blood and water on Fei Xing's face was washed away. He threw away the embroidery spring knife, kicked the edge of Lanjiantai, suddenly pulled out Yin Cheng's knife, and shouted to Duanzhou, "Fu Jun! Make a monument, and it will be carved with the words loyal liver, righteousness, courage, and feet. I will face the old man at Chashi with the old man and keep you for 10,000 years." Shun Zichuan spurred his horse, and rain splashed over his eyebrows. Duanzhou, Zhongbua. He has not been a cold wind for transit, and there are countless figures behind him. The heavy weight was superimposed on his shoulders, pushing Shun Zichuan, who was once wandering in the world, back to the ground. He stepped on this land, and he couldn't. The monarch raised his face in the heavy rain and shouted, "Break out!" Fei Xing jumped out of Lanjiantai, rolled off the ground, turned over, waved his knife to cut off the pony's front knee, and smashed into it with muddy water. An ant colony of cavalry rushed here, and the right wing was scattered in the cavalry's charge. Yangshan Zuedogang broke the rain, and the horseshoe stepped on the corpse to break southeast. Fei Xing set his scimitar and was pushed backwards. He was in the midst of a burst of rain and heard a blast through heavy rain. He slumped back into the mud, rolled around, wiped his face ecstatically. Reinforcement! The explosive sound on the south side of Duanzhou exploded again. Huolingyun braved the of the cavalry and blew up the road with the flames of this team. He loaded his mouth hard, wiped the rain, and burst into the cavalry while galloping. The Huantai tiger behind was already unable to hold back, and drew his sword and shouted, "Big dog bald in Dog's Day, Grandpa Tiger is here. The advance team of the Dunzhou Defense Forces has arrived." The sky was covered with thick clouds, and the gate closed again when the rain stopped. Shun Zichuan was panting and his fingers were white. When he got off the horse, the water in his boots squeezed out, and the sound of squeak on the ground, he said, "Unload the knife and rest." The genie riders dismounted one after another, stuffed with the food from the garrison, replaced the knife with a curling blade, and rested in the shed at the foot of the city. Time was precious. They didn't have time to change clothes, wrapped in a thin blanket and drank a few sips of hot tea, and slanted against the wall and slept. Huantai Tiger took off his helmet and went to the wall with Shun Zichuan. Huolingyun followed closely, saying, "I walked along Chashir Hebei and found that the Luosha post station was slaughtered midway. I originally wanted to return to Duanzhou to report to the Fujian, but there were too many cavalrymen, and I went west. Go and set off Lanjiantai in Dunzhou." Shun Zichuan posted a wet post on his cheek and said, "How is the battlefield?" "The road is cut off," said Hu Taihu. "From the current situation, the battlefield is not easy." Several people reached the wall and sat on the ground behind the preserved wall stack. The shabby shed was dry here. Shun Zichuan pushed away the military map and took off the agate with mud on his right ear, and put it in his arms. He looked at it for a while and said, "It's raining and the doorway is muddy. The cavalry's puppets are trapped and will not attack easily until the sun comes out. But it won't stop too long." Qiao Tianya nodded to Dunzhou. "They already know that Duanzhou's reinforcements are coming. The garrison troops are all infantry soldiers, and their footwork is slow. It will take an entire night for the large troops to reach Duanzhou, said Hu Taitai, touching the scar on his eyes. My advance team has only 2,000 people. Fei Xing lay down quickly. He was holding Yin Cheng's knife, and he didn't have the strength to choke again. His throat was hoarse. The wolf Yantai in the southeast is lit, we just have to stay tonight. The cavalry is fast, Huo Lingyun interrupted Fei Xing. If Hasten wants to stop Dunzhou reinforcements, it is still too time to move to the south, and you can't really gamble time tonight. Hassan's advantage is his understanding of the topography of China and Bo. The Dunzhou garrison is not a genie. They have to run on both feet. As long as they are blocked by the cavalry, they may stagnate behind Duanzhou and delay the rescue. We have to keep guarding until Bianjuan comes in. Huo Lingyun fingered down the sidewalk of Bianjuan toward Duanzhou. Eri said when he went south, as long as Hassan moved, the commander would go back to Gedail and attack Hassan. No matter what, Hassan won't be able to stay in Duanzhou for too long. Duanzhou's walls are strong, and we don't have to worry about food. At least we can keep it for another 2 days. Keep it for 2 more days. This sentence made everyone present at heart. Xiao Tianya turned his head, looked at the wall pile and said, "A battle against the water. The haze hangs over the sky, and the majestic Chashi was reduced to a pale white tack last night. After the city wall is rained, it will become black. The garrison continues to clean up the gate battlefield. No matter which soldier is on the side, as long as it becomes a corpse, it will be stacked together." Those faces were equally pale and hung in the quagmire, like dry weeds with no water. Shen Zichuan walked down the steps alone and washed his face next to the water tank. He held one arm and looked at his right hand. He soaked his hands in clean water, and the blood on the paraffin swung away instantly. Ayez's papa is dirty. Shen Zichuan unwrapped the papa. His fingers were swollen. He turned and sat down, wringed the blue parcel, dried it on his knees, raised his head, his eyes fixed on it. The wind was blowing over the trees next to it, and the leaves fell to the ground. Shen Zichuan leaned on the water tank and fell asleep. Hassan lifted the river with his hand, and buried his face in it, heading east, and said goodbye. The head at his feet was woven into strands, the machete was stained with blood, the newly cut leather revealed his wrists, and the cichlids for him were hidden in the sleeves. The aged wise man lifted up the river and poured it over Hassan's head, saying, "God blesses the eagle of the serpent division." Hassan raised his wet face. He looked at the wise man and asked, "Will I win?" The wise man leaned down and stroked Hassan's forehead. The muddy eyes carried the river. He seemed to be older than Chashif, and his wisdom was by no means comparable to Bayan. He knelt down, holding Hassan's cheek, and slowly said, "You're standing where we've never been." "There are wolves ahead," Hassan said. "I killed his father. The Wolf King killed your brothers and sisters." The wise man's old face looked like a desert dune in the desert. The compassion given by the God of heaven is accompanied by pain. He has taken away the grassland and the blue sky, and we have been dead. Hassan's chin was dripping with water drops. He was silent for a moment and said in a deep voice, "I will win." Shen Zichuan was awakened by the sound of shelling. At the moment he opened his eyes, he felt cold, and in the messy footsteps, he quickly wrapped around the parcel and stood up. Ignition! The surrounding torches lighted for a while, and Shen Zichuan stepped on the steps and stepped on the wall. "And the cavalry is crossing the river." Fei Xing looked into the distance. "They are gathering towards Duanzhou." Shen Zichuan drank the soup from Xiao Tianya and said, "Hassan is here. The cavalry has split its wings." Fei Xing sweated from behind. "No, they are going to charge on 3 sides." The cavalry was like an eagle that was only opening its wings. The center was condensed into strands, and its number was far more than daylight. "Notify the north and south gates." Shen Zichuan smashed the bowl and raised his voice, "Strictly guard against death." Before his words were settled, the wall stack in front of him collapsed in half. The genie rider and the garrison at the wall all ran, and the archer stood a ragged wall stack and opened the bow. Hassan's center didn't move like two wings. He used all the trebuchets and single-shot cannons. Heavy stones poured over the Duanzhou city wall, smashing the wall and splashing, and the archer couldn't pull the bow at all. The cavalry next to Hassan erected a banner, and the cavalry behind gave up the drum and blew a horn. The two wings have reached the north and south gates, and the arrows at the north gate have been placed in a batch. The gentlemen on the racecourse were taking a nap and suddenly heard the door slamming loudly. The women and children on the field burst into tears and huddled together. Siege! Gao Zhongxiong shuddered and hugged his pen and paper. The collision was unsuccessful at one time. Within a moment, I heard only a heavier crash, and the outermost gate immediately opened. The cries of the Biancha cavalry passed through the hanging door, and the people on the field panicked, cramping backwards. The garrison at the wall jumped down, pulled out the knife, and shouted at the court, "Run into the alley!" Before he finished speaking, the hanging door burst into the ground and saw the car crash out of the hole. The garrison raised its hand, and in a fierce pant tears flowed. At the moment when the underside of the hanging door was directly hit by a crash, he took the lead and ran out with a knife and shouted, "Kill the enemy!" Kong Ling was pushing a four-wheeler, and the gentlemen followed the people and flocked to the civilian area. The garrison could not hold the cavalry's charge, and the machete reeled past the head of the garrison. The horseshoe sound didn't stop, and it rushed towards the running crowd. The gentlemen have rushed to the alley, and the people are blocked inside. A woman has to pull a few children, and she has to bear the old man. All the young and strong people are in front of the hanging door. Gao Zhongxiong's paper fell down his arm. His legs were shaking and his body was shaking. Before he squeezed in, the back collar was hooked, and the entire body was dragged by the cavalry. He screamed in horror and rushed across the river. What the cavalry said, took a sip towards Gao Zhongxiong. Gao Zhongxiong was at the end of his journey. I didn't know where the strength came from. He also took a sip towards the cavalry and shouted, "You can kill, you can't shame." The cavalry pounced off the horse's back, and Kong Ling held the door latch he picked up, urging, "Hurry, run with power." The cavalry covered his back and climbed up, touching his machete. Gao Zhongxiong originally took a few steps backwards. Seeing that Kong Ling was going to fall behind, he thought about it, dragged the bag under his arm, and contained a pen holder inside. He aimed at the cavalry's head and smashed it. Back on the ground, Kong Ling did not lose the door latch, pushed Gao Zhongxiong in his robe, and the two ran to the alley. Gao Zhongxiong also turned his head and looked at Bao Yan while crying, That penny is expensive." Xiao Tianya galloped past, and ran into a cavalry head-on with a longitudinal brocade, and the two sides killed in such a blind light. The people in the alley covered their noses and mouths and dared to sob, not to scream. Hearing the mournful sounds, the garrison kept running. Yao Wenyu turned the four-wheeler. He was on the edge, but he couldn't hear any sound from Xiao Tianya. After half an hour, the torch suddenly lighted. Xiao Tianya wiped his chin, looked up slightly, glanced over Yao Wenyu, looked at Kong Ling, and said, "Mr. Qingfeng, take everyone to the house." Kong Ling responded, and then threw off the latch in it, hurried forward, greeted the people to follow, and Gao Zhongxiong hurried to pick up his own paper. Between the flames, Xiao Tianya staggered a few steps to approach Yao Wenyu. Yao Wenyu said, "Fu Jun." The four-wheeler tapped against the wall, Yuanzhua held his handle with one hand, and Xiao Tianya held his cheek in his dark corner to kiss. The kiss was not tender at all, and the smell was filled with amazing. Xiao Tianya let go of Yao Wenyu. He wiped his chin to Yuanzhua, stepped back quickly, left when he got on the horse, leaving Yao Wenyu to cover his chin in shock. Hassan whipped his whip. He led the elite to break through the trench, rushed to the east gate with mud, and the collision followed him. Huantai Tiger waved, ready. The crossbow on the wall moved, click, and more than a dozen garrison troops set up long arrows. This lethal bed crossbow can only be used to deal with Hassan, but the timing is difficult to find. You must first let Hassan back. The water in the ditch shook and Hassan's horse landed. He scrambled with a scimitar, blocked it steadily, and saw Shen Zichuan across the fire and dust. In the first confrontation, the two failed to please, and at the moment of staggering, they weighed each other's weight. Hassan's red hair was slightly off. He turned his machete and pointed his blade at Shen Zichuan as if aiming. To be precise, Shen Zichuan. Shen Zichuan gently brushed the blade, and Feng Shuangyi lifted his hoof away from Hassan, and he sharply scraped off the head of Hassan's accompanying cavalry. Hassan thought of Shao Qia, and Shao Qia sent Aqi's head back. This was a shame, just like he took Shao Fengshu's head away. Both sides had no way back, and the steel blades collided several times. The cavalry pushed Genie back, and Genie stubbornly pushed back. Their horseshoes were staggered in the mud, and someone kept falling and turned into mud. The garrison at the wall pushed all the remaining heavy stones down, and the cavalry and the bench that fell over seemed to never finish. Shen Zichuan and Hassan met different opponents. He still has reason in the face of such a critical attack. He may not be as strong as Hassan, but he is cunning enough. Hassan's assaults plunged into the water. It was a sense of powerlessness that could not be caught. This was the trickiest opponent. Hassan retracted his machete on his back and turned out of the thorn. The oil on the wall splattered and burned everywhere. Hassan took the lead. His ridges blocked the necessary path of Yang Shanshue's oblique cutting. The war horse slammed forward, stepping on the frost coat, and forced Shen Zichuan against the gate by brute force. Break in! Yang Shanshu almost took off his hand, and the handle of the knife held up Shen Zichuan's 2 fingers. However, Shen Zichuan didn't realize it. He just stiffly passed the handle, and clenched the handle with the remaining 3 fingers, so that the back of the knife rested on the forearm, just like Yin Chang's trick. The blade cut to Hassan's throat. Hassan ducked and dodged, followed by a backstab, and slammed into the chest of Shen Zichuan. Shen Zichuan grabbed Hassan's wrist with a split hand, but he was not strong enough. In the blink of life and death, he slammed Hassan's ridge down so that Hassan's advance could only pierce the side waist, avoiding his own vitals. Fujian. Yen Taihu watched Hassan attack on the wall. His spirits disappeared. Hassan stabbed Shen Zichuan's waist and wanted to retreat, but found his fingers were like nails. Shen Zichuan's eyes were cold and he said, "Push." Behind the seemingly chaotic Jin Yi riding time reorganization, followed by Shen Zichuan withdrew the center, swarming towards Hassan. It's a trick. Hassan stabbed, and the warrior riding in Genie had hit him. The striker was immediately knocked back, and the rear horse fell into the trench. The crossbow was pulled up, but it was not enough. Shen Zichuan snapped, "Push it!" The pass boards in the trench were almost broken, the river was splashing, and the fire and rain on the wall was still falling. Hassan's charge had dissipated, and he rolled back with Shen Zichuan's force on his back. Shen Zichuan fell into the mud, too late to wipe his face, first a tumbling, separated from Hassan. He was so dirty that he couldn't see where the blood was bleeding. The blood beads were all mixed in the muddy water, covered by the sound of the hoisting horseshoe. Hassan knows how to seize the opportunity. He has seen Shen Zichuan in shirt size several fights. This man's physical exhaustion is not his opponent at all. He rushed up, and by the splashing mud water immediately flashed in front of Shen Zichuan. Shen Zichuan blocked his knife, and was repelled half a step by the impact of Hassan's gravity. He protruded before Hassan stood still, sweeping Hassan. Hassan supported the ground with one hand and immediately jumped up, his thorns turning extremely smart between his fingers. Shen Zichuan ducked, Yang Shanshue collided with the thorns, crackly. Huantai Tiger was anxious, and raised his hand and shouted, "Fire attack, cover the prince." The garrison on the wall opened the bow and arrow with shelling. Hassan actually backed up a little. After looking at the wall, he knew that he was doing it again. Before he looked away, his chest sank suddenly, and Shen Zichuan was turned to the rear. Hassan held Shen Zichuan's ankle as he fell to the rear and dragged Shen Zichuan to the ground. The mud splattered, and the slackened, and the 3 fingers of perception failed to hold Yangshan's snow tightly, and Yangshan's snow fell aside. Shen Zichuan's mammoth bleeding remembered to get up, but did not get up. Hassan stood up sharply, watching Shen Zichuan want to hold a knife, dragging Shen Zichuan's ankle, dragging people to the rear. Shen Zichuan grabbed a hole in the mud. He gave up Yang Shanxue decisively, holding the injured part of his waist with one hand, and turned it up against his waist. These few times are terrible. Shen Zichuan was panting heavily, and his elbow thumped against Hassan's facade. Ji Jiachuan's stiffness fell sharply, and Hassan released his hand. But Hassan responded quickly, and the right-handed spine was released, then fell to his left hand, accidentally inserted into Shen Zichuan's throat. Shen Zichuan couldn't stop with one arm. He gripped Hassan's left hand with his arms arrogantly. Shen Zichuan had blood between his teeth, and he had the salty smell, twisted over Hassan's left hand, raised his knee and hit Hassan's chest when Hassan leaned towards himself. Hassan immediately fell to the ground. Shen Zichuan tilted his head to shed his blood, and when Hassan looked up he smashed Hassan's head. Hassan kept his face away, holding Shen Zichuan's forearm empty-handed, and while Shen Zichuan pulled back, he turned away and took Shen Zichuan's whole body into the mud again. Shen Zichuan's right arm was misaligned. When he fell to the ground, he grabbed Hassan's side neckline and said, "Huan Tai Hu roared, 'Go ahead!'" Mars bounced around the crossbow of the bed, and at the moment when the long arrow suddenly burst out, he brought a strong wind, and then went straight to Hassan. Hassan tugged at Shen Zichuan, rolled back, and rushed into the trench. The long arrow of the bed crossbow smashed into the trench and stirred up the waves. Shen Zichuan was dizzy after taking a few mouthfuls of dirty water. Hassan never let go of him, dragging him across the trench. "Your head," Hassan pulled out his machete again. "I want to give it to Xiaoqie." Shen Zichuan raised his neck and spit out the sand in his breath, laughing out loud. He was half condensed with affection and looked particularly evil, saying, "The wind is here." Hassan hooked out his machete, but Shen Zichuan immediately raised his legs and slammed on Hassan's chest. At the moment when he stepped on him, he clamped his left side dagger with his left hand and twisted his machete. The scimitar stuttered and Hassan struggled backwards. Shen Zichuan had landed, he had a machete, and hit another in the face of Hassan when he stepped back. Hassan leaned forward, learning Shen Zichuan's previous movements, squatting down and sweeping his legs. Shen Zichuan did not fall. Hassan stood up, and at this moment a tear-like wind broke out again in the air, with sharp arrows accompanied by the exploding sullen thunder, nailed to Hassan by the storm. Overlord Bao raining. That's not the stuffy thunder in the sky, but the thunder clusters on the ground. The heavy riding roared, and even the rain could hit and fly when charging, just like a brutal beast flew out of the dark night. Langtao Shula broke through the rain curtain, and Xiao Qie, who was covered in blood, was like a black lightning, killing him from the sky to the battlefield. Yen Frost Transit. Here comes the wolf.